Misty Mountain's orc reputation, current reputation, minus 3456, sworn enemy, thud. Before the flames could even catch, the Orc King's HP dropped to 0 and he collapsed, dead. The moment he fell, the sworn enemy label on the reputation interface flashed crimson, as if newly activated. "The king is dead," a goblin shouted. The goblins erupted. Some howled, some froze in confusion, some panicked and grabbed weapons. A few reckless ones charged, trying to hide their fear with violence, but it changed nothing. "Run!" Gandalf barked, leading them away. Li Wei pointed his sword and shoved back a few scattered, crazed goblins as they fought and retreated. Very quickly, though, the goblins accepted the truth. Their king was gone. They turned as one toward Li Wei and his group, converging from every direction with furious intent. Li Wei looked up and saw goblins clinging to the rock walls, along the wooden bridge, even hanging from the cave ceiling. Every nook was filled like a rising tide. If they were submerged like this, neither the dwarves nor Gandalf, and certainly not he, would fare well. "It's too exposed here. I can't hold them," Li Wei shouted. He pulled out his pickaxe, slammed it into the ground, dug holes and stacked blocks behind them to block the way. "Quick, everyone, get in. We'll dig our way out." "Stop. Don't jump." Gandalf grabbed a dwarf back. "Time may not be on our side. Don't forget there are 13 dwarves with us." "I see light. Must be a rear exit. Follow me, hurry. Cave goblins won't go out into sunlight," Gandalf urged, springing forward. Li Wei put away his pickaxe and ran, scanning for Bilbo. He still hadn't seen the Hobbit and didn't know how he was doing. Boom, a crack of thunder. Because goblins crowded the route, Gandalf sent another bolt of lightning to clear a path, but it was weaker than before, just enough to carve a way through. As they pressed on, the exit grew brighter and the sound of wind reached them. The dwarves slipped out one by one. Gandalf followed. Li Wei hesitated at the mouth of the cave, looked left and right, then stepped into the light. The sunlight stung their eyes, but nobody stopped. They ran until they could finally slow and catch their breath. 13 dwarves in total, just right, Gandalf counted, then froze. "Wait, where's Bilbo?" Flashback. When the group had escaped to the rear exit, Bilbo had followed Gollum all the way there. The exit was close, but Gollum stood between him and freedom. The creature clearly didn't have the strength to block the way, but Bilbo hid behind a rock and dared not make a sound. He watched his companions slip out and wanted to cry for help, but they were gone. Gollum, relieved when Gandalf and the others left, planned to emerge and start searching for the stolen Hobbit again. Bilbo had to back deeper into the cave. Then a dark figure appeared at the exit, and Gollum recoiled and clutched his head, terrified. The stranger stood for a moment, eyes sweeping every nook. For an instant, Bilbo felt his gaze meet that stranger's, and he took several hurried steps forward, almost shouting, "Wait!" But the man left before he could call out. Bilbo sighed. Another missed chance. He had to rely on himself. He drew his short sword, raised it, and fixed his eyes on Gollum. One swift swing, and the creature who had tried to kill him would be dead. He remembered Gandalf's words. True courage is not in deciding when to kill, but in deciding when to spare. Looking into Gollum's big, terrified eyes, Bilbo shook his head, sheathed his blade, kicked Gollum over, and slipped away. "Damn thief!" Gollum shrieked after him, but Bilbo ignored it and followed the dwarves down into the mountain forest. "No need to go searching," Thorin said when Gandalf asked. "He's probably abandoned us and gone home." "No, he hasn't." Bilbo suddenly stepped out from behind them. "Bilbo," Gandalf hurried to meet him. "I've never been this glad to see anyone." "How did you get out of there?" a dwarf asked. Bilbo's hand slipped into his pocket and he felt the ring inside. Should he tell them? It was only a ring he had found, maybe magical, and besides, it wasn't his. He swallowed and steeled himself. "What does it matter? He's back anyway," Gandalf said, interrupting him. "Of course it matters," Thorin pressed, stepping forward. "I want to know why you came back. I know you've always been suspicious of me. I do miss home, beautiful gardens, comfortable chairs, a warm little house. That's my home. You have none of that." Bilbo's voice trembled. "So I'll do my best to help you reclaim yours." The dwarves fell silent. Gandalf looked relieved. Li Wei patted Bilbo's shoulder, offering quiet support. He glanced down and noticed a faint glint in Bilbo's pocket, the ring. It caught his eye through the slight opening. For a moment, Li Wei's breath hitched and an urge rose in him to pull it from Bilbo's pocket. A buff icon blinked on the status bar. The instant Li Wei realized he was being tempted, the buff vanished. Corruption. %. A new system entry popped up. What are you doing, Li Wei? Everyone stared as Li Wei suddenly grabbed a large bucket of milk and began chugging it down. No one knew where the iron bucket or the milk had come from, but he kept drinking as if nothing else mattered. It's nothing, just thirsty, Li Wei said, belching as if to dismiss their concern. But no matter how much milk he drank, the corruption bar in the interface didn't go away. It seemed to have become a permanent status. This thing was truly insidious. He looked up and forced himself not to look down at the ring. The tiny light over the ring reluctantly dimmed. On a small hill not far from the rear exit of Orktown, Azazog listened to a goblin's report and gnawed his teeth in fury. The dwarves had escaped and the Orc King had been killed. "Chase them!" he snarled. A woo. Wargs howled from the hilltop. Gandalf looked up and saw a white figure leading a pack of wargs and orcs, several hundred strong. "Run!" he yelled. They barely had time to rest before they ran again, fleeing the pursuing horde. "Always running, never a moment's peace," Li Wei muttered, then turned back toward the threat. He moved among the dwarves with his longsword drawn, its blade flashing in the fading light. The wargs came down like a mountain flood, roaring and spreading out to cut off every escape. The charge smashed into an invisible barrier around Li Wei and halted, as if striking a solid rock. Wargs swarmed him. His thin, golden, apple-shaped shield quickly depleted, but the armor beneath held. Agile wargs twisted and snapped at him, but couldn't find purchase. Li Wei could take repeated hits. Each time he struck back, a warg collapsed, charred and lifeless. Ahead, Azog noticed the disturbance and ordered most of his troops to continue the chase. He turned, though, and strode back toward Li Wei. Just a brief transition. The pace will quicken later, and the content will grow richer. Chapter 62, Azog's Sworn Enemy. It meant a conflict that ended only when one side was wiped out. Li Wei didn't think the orcs were particularly formidable, but they certainly regarded him that way. "It was you and those damned dwarves who killed the king of Orktown." Azog hefted a warhammer and stalked toward Li Wei, followed by a baying mob of orcs egging their leader on. "Orc Slayer, enemy of orcs, what filthy titles. Do you think all orcs fear you? You're sorely mistaken." Thud! Azog casually swung his hammer and snapped a thin sapling nearby, which crashed to the ground. "I'll kill you first. Let everyone see what trash you are. Then I'll go finish off those dwarf scum." Ignoring the taunts, Li Wei looked up. This one had a huge frame, not short at all, at least 2 meters tall, and his body was all rippling muscle. That kind of build was rare among orcs. Even the Uruk-hai Saruman would breed later, probably wouldn't outmatch him. Anyone can talk big, so arrogant, hope you don't throw out your back. Li Wei drew his longsword. "Same goes for you." Azog roared and swung. Clang, sword met warhammer. The impact drove Li Wei's blade aside and left him exposed in the first exchange. For the first time, Li Wei felt his weapon being overpowered by a heavy tool. Azog's grin turned cruel. Relying on raw strength, he swung his hammer again. Thump! A direct hit to Li Wei's chest. He felt the dull sting of the blow and was forced a half-step back. Interesting. An ordinary attack could bypass my defenses. If it had hit anyone else, even the dwarves, those walking stones, that blow might have knocked them down. Against a full set of Protection 4 netherite alloy armor, though, it still wasn't fatal. Almost as soon as the health dropped, it began to replenish. Li Wei seized the moment, drew his sword, and slashed. Years of fighting orcs had honed his swift style. Maybe not fancy forms, but his draw-cut sheath routine was flawless, the result of killing thousands of orcs and wargs. Still, the strike flitted off. At a critical instant, Azog raised his modified left hand and used the metal claw to firmly parry Li Wei's blade, then swung the hammer again. Thump! Li Wei forced up his shield with his left hand, blocking, but the shield went into a broken state and fell into a short cooldown. Roar! Feeling dominant, Azog spread his arms and stalked the small arena the orcs and wargs formed, making a full circle and brazenly flexing. He was already celebrating victory before it was decided. The surrounding orcs cheered, the wargs howled and made sneering expressions like men. The pressure of their presence bore down on Li Wei. He glanced around once, and every orc he looked at immediately shut up and drew back. Without Azog, they would have scattered at the first sight of him. This was the morale a powerful leader brought. As the duel dragged on, the sun sank and the pale moon rose. Night strengthened the orcs. When starlight replaced daylight, the orcs straightened, their auras growing. From that moment, all the daylight weakness effects vanished. Some, emboldened by the moon and by Azog, even met Li Wei's gaze. "You're dead, haha." Azog parried Li Wei's sword again and slammed his hammer. Thump! The shield went into cooldown once more. This hit felt stronger. Azog's power had increased, but it still couldn't permanently break Li Wei's shield. The shield had a mysterious upper limit on absorbing force. No matter how strong the attack, it would at least block once, at most go broken for a short cooldown. Such a nuisance. Li Wei felt a headache coming on. In games, bosses get tougher by inflating health and attack stats, but in reality, this fight was different. You actually had to be able to fight. Don't let his low HP fool you. It only counts if you can land hits. This opponent wasn't an ordinary orc grunt. Nevertheless, reality has its own rules. After blocking the heavy blow, Li Wei set aside his amusement and attacked in earnest. Draw, slash, draw again. Slashes and sweeps so fast they left afterimages. Azog kept parrying and retreating, but stamina is finite. Given food, Li Wei could keep going indefinitely. When Azog finally showed a hint of fatigue, Li Wei struck, boom. Flames erupted as Li Wei's blade cut a wide gash across Azog's chest. The pale orc howled, his health plummeted, nearly halved. In desperation, Azog hurled his warhammer at Li Wei. In the split second, Li Wei dodged. The surrounding orcs surged forward, blocking his sword and covering Azog. For a moment, Li Wei felt like he was cutting through a wall of flesh and couldn't get through all of them. By the time those blocking orcs lay dead, the flames around Azog had died out. He was being hauled onto a white warg more than twice the size of a normal warg, the pale warg king, and they fled. Li Wei fired several arrows at them, but the warg king dodged skillfully. Sometimes Li Wei wished he had an auto-aim. The warg king roared and galloped away. Azog, clutching his chest and barely alive, stared back at Li Wei as if burning that face into memory. Azog's army scattered and rushed after him. Misty Mountains orc reputation, current reputation, -3756. Li Wei had a feeling that once his reputation dropped far enough, something new would happen. Seeing Azog escape, he tried to pursue, but dozens of wargs suddenly charged back, cutting him off. Under the warg king's command, they formed a circling barrier, close enough to encircle him, but not close enough to attack. Li Wei took a step forward. The wargs took a step back. He feinted a charge with his sword, and the nearest wargs yelped and scattered like dogs with their tails stepped on. To still dare stand here and block me, even like this, is bold. These wargs belonged to the enemy faction and couldn't be tamed. Otherwise, a pack of fast, powerful mounts would have been useful. They kept their distance, but Li Wei pressed the attack. His sword flashed, and the wargs' loyalty to their pack snapped. They fled in all directions. Acquired title, Enemy of Wargs. Li Wei chased in the direction Azog had taken, but the minute or two he'd lost to the wargs was enough. Azog had vanished. "You won't escape," he sheathed his sword. Azog's head would have to wait. With the wargs and orcs driven off, Li Wei hurried toward where the dwarves had gone. He reached a cliff and found the place a sea of fire. The dwarves, the orcs, Gandalf, and Bilbo were nowhere in sight. "Huh?" Li Wei crossed the burning ground and looked around. "You left me here?" Whoosh! A sudden gust of wind made him squint. "Li Wei!" A great eagle rose up from below the cliff with Gandalf on its back, calling to him and signaling for him to jump on. "We've been waiting for you." Moments later, Li Wei sat cross-legged on the eagle's back, talking with Gandalf. "You gave me a fright. I thought something had happened to you, or that you'd left without me. How could that be? This company wouldn't leave you, even if they threw me out." Gandalf puffed his pipe and sighed. "We were ambushed by a pack of wargs at the cliff edge. At first we handled them, but the dwarves tired and were nearly forced off the cliff. I used a small spell to isolate that pack of wargs, then called for help." Gandalf glanced at the great eagle with a nod. These eagles weren't ordinary beasts. They were intelligent, held status, and were friends to him. Small spell? Li Wei's mind lingered on the phrase. Was that little spell called Firestorm? Yes, alas. Today was truly exhausting. Chapter 63. Stay on the road near the Anduin at the Carrick. After a brief conference, the great eagles had flown as far as they were willing to go. They set everyone down gently and returned to their eyries. Li Wei had no idea what had happened while he was away, but everyone looked battered and tired rather than injured. Bilbo, Thorin said, clutching the hobbit tightly, I once told you there was no place for you among us. That was the greatest mistake of my life. Li Wei leaned toward Gandalf and whispered, What happened? Thorin had been surrounded by wargs, exhausted and near death. Bilbo had rushed in and saved him. So that's it. Luck might explain the timing, but courage was plain to see. Li Wei glanced at Bilbo and then at his own pocket. The thing tucked there, perhaps Bilbo's possession of it was part of some greater design. But no one is born to suffer, and no one is meant to be consumed by it. Still, Bilbo's resistance to the ring's power was remarkable. He had borne it for decades, and could still give it up of his own will. If anything could be done, it was better to try than to watch him be corroded. If they were to tackle the root of the problem, there would be more to do after the quest to the Lonely Mountain. After a short rest, they descended from the Carrick and pressed on toward the Lonely Mountain. A few days later, Gandalf climbed a high ridge and frowned as he surveyed the plain and the forests on both sides of the river. Wargs and orcs were everywhere. They've practically sent out their whole army, one of the dwarves muttered below. I'd wager the number of scouts searching for us runs into the thousands. Gandalf's brows deepened in thought. Then a deep, fearsome roar split the air from above. Everyone grabbed their weapons and looked up to see a giant bear standing on a high crag, teeth bared. Oh my, one of the dwarves stammered, trembling. It's bigger than any bear I've ever seen. Before the beast could lunge, it suddenly sprang down. Li Wei reached for his sword, but Gandalf stepped between him and the bear. Wait, he called. Bjorn, I know you. Calm yourself. I am Gandalf the Grey, friend of Radagast the Brown. The bear stared at Gandalf for a long, tense moment, then relaxed. Its great bulk seemed to shrink. Fur drew back and limbs thinned until, before the company's astonished eyes, the beast became a man 2 meters tall. The dwarves gaped and rubbed their eyes. That is a skin changer, Gandalf explained. They are born with the power to take the form of fiercer beasts. Bjorn looked down at the little group. He was composed when his gaze rested on Li Wei and Bilbo, but when it passed over the dwarves, his expression hardened. What brings a wizard, a man, a hobbit, and greedy dwarves so close to my borders? He demanded. Gandalf stepped forward. We mean no harm. We are passing through, fleeing the orcs. They have been everywhere these last days, mad with some purpose. Even I dared not take some routes. Bjorn listened, his face betraying worry. The skin changer's fate was already a sorrowful one. Driven from their mountain homes by orcs, most of their few kin had been captured and cruelly slain. It seemed possible that Bjorn might be the last of his kind, and Gandalf wished to force him into needless combat. All right, Bjorn said at last. He did not trust strangers, and he had little love for dwarves, but he trusted the name of Radagast's companion. The enemy of the orcs is my ally. I can help you. I know a path that avoids their watch. You may leave by it at daybreak. I will keep watch for you, he added. That night, by moonlight, the great bear stood on a promontory and kept vigil while the party ate and slept under his protection. An orc scout reported back to his chief, noting the giant beast on the rock, but the chief dismissed it. Ignore it. Go around. We have no need to trouble ourselves. He went on in a lower voice. Our target is that company of dwarves and that damned. He shivered and would not finish the name. If you meet him, do not attack alone. Fall back and summon the army. Then we will destroy him. At dawn, Bjorn supplied the company with his homemade honey bread and strong drink, saddled horses, and pointed out the hidden route. They left quickly, and, over the next few days, the orcs failed to find their quarry and gradually fell back, withdrawing from the plain for the time being. When they reached the gate of the Black Forest, Mirkwood Gate, the horses given by Bjorn were turned loose, all except one that Gandalf led with him. This place has been defiled by evil, Gandalf said, frowning. It does not look good. He leaned close to Li Wei and spoke softly, turning his back to the others. Li Wei, may I ask a favor? What is it? I need to confirm something in the coming days. Do you know of the Ringwraiths? A little. They are Sauron's servants. Bilbo's eyes flickered, and he scratched his head. Oh no, don't say his name carelessly, Leeway. Best not to speak it unless needed. Gandalf rubbed his temples. The ring might have been lost, but Sauron was far from utterly ended. Speaking his name without caution could draw attention. Many elves use titles instead, he who must not be named, or simply the nameless. But that is not my point. I must make a long journey to learn whether the Ringwraiths have been summoned again. You want me to go with you? Leeway asked. No, I will go alone. What I ask is that when I return, you come with me to Dol Guldur. There may be something there. It's not just something, Leeway thought. He suspected Sauron's presence there, but he only said aloud, All right, when do you expect to return? Gandalf gave a time that would stretch out a while. Very well. If any of us arrive early, wait 3 days at the main gate. Gandalf mounted and rode off. The company entered the Black Forest. Along the path, Bilbo whispered, Leeway, what did Gandalf say? Leeway answered plainly. He said the forest is corrupted and dangerous. We must keep to the main road as much as possible. It's the safest path. Bilbo nodded gravely. I understand. I'll be careful. Author's note. Thanks to Shy Little Starfish for the 500 coin reward, to the reader who fishes while reading and gaming for the 100 coin reward, to Asen for 100 coins, and to everyone who voted, recommended, or supported me this month. Thank you for your support. Chapter 64, Black Forest. In Dol Guldur, a dark shape materialized in the high tower, a shadow looking down over the land of darkness. Azog, a voice said into the pale orc's mind. Azog snapped awake, gasping. He touched his chest twice. Where a huge gash had run from shoulder to waist, there was only a long scar. The wound had completely healed. He looked up toward the shadow on the tower that had spoken his name. Anger rose in him at first, but when he recognized the presence, it cooled into a different, colder fury. It was not the enemy he loved to hate. It was the Dark Lord himself, Sauron. Azog, lead the army. Prepare for war, the voice ordered. For the dwarves? Azog asked, forgetting for a moment the healed wound. You promised me he would die. If any other orc had dared answer like that, he would likely have been struck down. But Azog and Sauron had a working relationship of sorts. Azog had the temerity to demand answers. Sauron made no reply to the question. He only repeated his command. Azog's chest heaved with rage, but the order was absolute. There was no choice but obedience. He called for his son, Bolg, and sent him to continue the pursuit of the dwarves. Bolg had inherited his father's size and strength, and Azog made his terms clear. If you see that human, he spat, you may withdraw if you must. But if you kill him, the leadership will be yours. Bolg set off with a company of orcs. In the woodland realm, the dwarves trudged drowsily through the dark, leaf-choked woods, complaining about the dimness and the lack of sun. Despite the gloom, the journey had been uneventful, and they soon came to a broken bridge spanning a small river. Don't touch it, Leeway warned when a dwarf reached for the water. He bent to scoop some into a bucket himself, finding it ordinary enough. This was no water to be bottled and taken away. Whatever magic flowed through it was tied to the Black Forest alone. Didn't Gandalf tell us? Thorin called out. This forest is steeped in dark magic. The river carries a curse. There are vines over there. We could swing across, one suggested. Let the light ones go first. No, we can build a crossing, Leeway interrupted. With a few precise motions, he produced stones and, clack, 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 laid them from the broken bridge to the other side. He made the path a little wider in places so the broader dwarves wouldn't fall. Remarkable, old Balin said, roused and impressed. For my part, I didn't fancy that vine. I doubt it would hold Bombur. If anyone needs hauling, I'm right here, Bombur grumbled, pouting. Keely stamped on the newly made stones to test their steadiness. Feely jabbed at them with a grin. Among those who hang out with Gandalf, how many are normal? He caught himself and added hastily, I didn't mean to call you anything. It's fine, I understand, Leeway said kindly, clapping Feely on the shoulder. Slowly the dwarves had come to regard Leeway the way they regarded Gandalf, that is, as someone who could do things others could not, and therefore deserved a measure of deference. Leeway had a contract and obligations to them, but his occasional displays of magic, conjuring simple food, producing building blocks from thin air, had become ordinary. Gandalf himself could summon lightning and fire and rout a pack of goblins in a single gust. Compared to the old wizard, Li Wei was modest in his use of power, but he was still respected. Thorin, too, treated him with the same tolerant allowance the dwarves reserved for wizards. At the back of the line, Bilbo lingered, fingers worrying the ring in his pocket as he peered at the conjured stones. "Do I have an invisibility spell, too?" he wondered. "Don't dawdle. Through the forest quickly," Thorin urged. Beyond the dark river lay a stretch of land closer to the elven realm, and shadows were moving there. Li Wei eyed the webs clinging to the branches and fought the impulse to snip off a length to keep. The spiders in this forest sense prey by vibrations in their webs. Any careless cutting might draw a swarm. The others were drowsy, ill-suited for a fight, so he restrained himself. A low hum came from above. Li Wei drew his sword in one smooth motion and slashed upward. A giant spider fell to the path, its carcass smoking and already burning at the edges. An odd onlooker might have heard, almost like a notice, the words, "Achievement unlocked, Spider Slayer." "Spiders," Thorin said, suddenly alert. "They infest this forest. They move in to claim it." "Did anyone touch a web?" Li Wei asked. "They track prey by vibration." "No webs," came the chorus. "I've kept to the main path." "Not me. Neither have I." So the spiders had moved of their own accord. Li Wei, picking up a length of silk and a couple of cold spider eyes that had fallen at his feet, felt a brief, practical tug. They were useful materials. He kept them, discreetly. "Prepare yourselves," Thorin shouted, and everyone seized weapons. Bilbo, trembling, drew his small sword and glanced at it with new respect. Above them, the trees began to move. Giant spiders crawled down from the canopy in such numbers they blotted out the sky. "Run!" Thorin barked, echoing Gandalf's favorite command. Bombur, the largest, immediately became a magnet for attackers. He screamed as he bashed spider heads with a makeshift club. Each strike splattered dark ichor. Li Wei moved like a blade, cutting a swath through the nearest attackers. 2 or 3 strokes, and the spiders were done, burbling into small piles of blackened remains. He slashed across the line to the grouped dwarves and kept moving, so fast his sword was nearly a blur. No single spider could stand against his blows. He collected several handfuls of spider eyes as the tide of bodies mounted. From the back, they could see a burned trail where Li Wei had passed, rows of smoking spider corpses, as if someone had scraped fire through the undergrowth. The dwarves fought stoutly. Bilbo even managed to stab one in the head. For an instant, he fancied the creature spoke as it died, emitting a faint, odd sound. Sting, the sound might have been. Bilbo smiled, and before he could stop himself, named his sword aloud. "Sting," he said. "That's the name." Just as the battle seemed to tilt in their favor, new noises came from higher in the trees. Arrows thudded with precise timing, each one finding a spider's vulnerable joint. A group of elves in dark green slipped among the branches, moving like shadows and dispatching the remaining spiders with swift, deadly efficiency. For a moment, the dwarves breathed easier. Then the elves turned their bows, and not at the spiders. "Don't think I won't lay a hand on you, dwarves," one of them warned. Their leader drew his bow and took aim at Thorin. Li Wei stepped forward, sword sheathed. The elf leader looked straight at him and paused. Li Wei raised his hands in a placating gesture. The young elf lowered his bow and signaled the others to do the same. "Do not point your bows at him," the elf said in a clear voice. "He is our honored guest." Legolas, the prince of the woodland realm, had arrived among the branches. His green-clad band relaxed their aim but kept watchful eyes on the company below. Chapter 65, Woodland Kingdom. "I've heard of you, Li Wei," Legolas said as he sheathed his bow and took 2 graceful steps forward. "A powerful warrior and a sorcerer, said to be the scourge of the orcs. Welcome to the woodland realm. I am Legolas." There had been a lot of talk about this human lately, some of it ridiculous. When Legolas first heard the stories, he was skeptical. It seemed impossible for a mortal to accomplish such things. It wasn't until his father, Thranduil, king of the woodland realm, confirmed the reports that Legolas took them seriously. In the elves' eyes, Li Wei's recent deeds, driving the orcs from the river valley near the dark forest, had earned him instant respect. His reputation with the woodland realm was already that of a trusted friend. A female elf followed Legolas, appraisal in her gaze. "Guard Captain Toriel," she said coolly. "I greet you." Li Wei nodded. "I greet you both." Before hospitality could be offered, matters turned awkward. A handful of dwarves who had come with Li Wei were being eyed for a search. "They are my companions," Li Wei said. "I don't know why they came here. If you suspect them, they must be questioned, but they are not threats." Legolas motioned toward the dwarves, preparing to search them. "Why? You're showing favoritism," one protested. "Discrimination." "We're with Li Wei," another shouted. "Don't touch my things." Li Wei stepped between them. "Our purpose is the same." His words were simple but loaded. If the elves were to detain his companions, they would have to detain him as well. No one wanted the woodland realm as an enemy, least of all a living legend whose name had spread so widely. Legolas hesitated, glancing at Li Wei, and was about to answer when a scout burst in. "Lord Thranduil requests your presence," the scout announced. Legolas scanned the room, then gave an order with a reluctant sigh. "Take them back." The dwarves visibly relaxed. Bilbo, tucked safely in the middle of the party, felt his anxiety ease and abandoned the thought of slipping into invisibility. The group was escorted through the palace and into a reception hall. The massive doors closed with a clang behind them, and although the dwarves were spared searches and chains, they were kept under close guard. Guards positioned themselves to ensure no sudden moves were made. Eventually, Thorin and Bilbo were brought before the throne. Li Wei, however, had already been speaking with Thranduil for some time. "Since last year," Thranduil said, "I've heard of a lone ranger in the Anduin Valley who stood against the Aoke host and led the humans to safety. A gray-cloaked wizard accompanied him as well." "I know of Gandalf," Li Wei replied, "but I did not expect to face so many orcs alone." Thranduil rose from his throne and descended the dais, his gaze intent on Li Wei as he consulted the Woodland Realm's records by memory and ritual. "And this?" he asked. Li Wei patted the long sword at his side. "This sword helped. May I?" Thranduil asked. Li Wei handed it over. Thranduil examined the blade with the careful eye of a craftsman. "Fine workmanship. Does it have a name?" "No," Li Wei admitted. "I haven't named it." "Once it is named," the king said with a faint smile, returning the sword, "it will bring fear to the orcs." He sheathed it with a practiced flourish and retook his seat. After polite formalities, Thranduil returned to the business at hand. "Li Wei, bane of orcs, savior of the Anduin, wielder of potent magic, what brings you to the Woodland Realm? Are you fleeing the Aoke, or merely passing through?" Li Wei began to explain the tangled reasons behind their journey, but Thranduil cut in before he could finish. "Whatever your purpose, you are welcome here. Stay as long as you wish. The Woodland Realm reserves its hospitality for friends." Thranduil's friendliness extended fully to Li Wei. He made no mention of the dwarves, treating the humans' arrival as if it had been solitary. Li Wei cleared his throat and spoke plainly. "Those dwarves are my companions. We intend to reclaim the Lonely Mountain. If the dwarves regain their home, it would be a strong bulwark against the darkness." Thranduil's expression changed when Li Wei added, "There is a dragon there." The king's reaction was subtle but unmistakable. He had no desire to underestimate the threat of a dragon. Even when he had led entire forces in the past, engaging a dragon directly had been something to avoid. Victory could come at a cost too great for the elves. Their people were no longer as numerous as in the old days. A major war could hasten their decline. Before Thranduil could warn Li Wei against boasting, guards announced the arrival of Thorin and Bilbo. Bilbo's eyes were wide and anxious as he looked from face to face. Seeing Li Wei among them eased his nerves somewhat. Thranduil still bore a mild smile when he spoke with Li Wei, but when Thorin entered the throne room, that smile vanished, and the king's posture tightened. Thorin, as was his way, greeted the wood elves with open contempt. Insults spilled from him in a torrent. He scoffed at the elves' claims and demanded that his company be shown respect. Several times, Li Wei had to restrain himself from silencing the dwarf. Thranduil's patience wore thin. "I have never seen such a shameless dwarf," the king snapped. Thorin had underestimated the Woodland Realm. Their grace was not patience. It could be quick and cutting. "If you wish to remain here, remain and rot," Thranduil said icily. "A few hundred years are a blink to an elf. I have the time to wait." Imprison these dwarves, he ordered. Under Thorin's provocation, the goodwill Li Wei brought with him was squandered. The dwarves had their weapons confiscated and were led away in chains. Thranduil, however, did not punish Bilbo. He spoke with the Hobbit for a time, then released him to move freely, as he had Li Wei. Author's note. Thank you all for your support. I'll be posting on Sanjiang this afternoon with a large update expected on Friday. I've read your comments and know there are areas I haven't fully explained yet. Don't worry, many details will be revealed in later chapters. I appreciate your patience and the insights some readers have shared in the comment section. This story has come this far thanks to you. Chapter 66. Allies. What a stubborn teammate. Li Wei slapped his forehead. With Thorin in full rant, even Gandalf could call 10 more great eagles and still not calm Thranduil's temper. The fact the elves hadn't cut them down outright already showed how strongly the Free Peoples felt. Putting himself in their shoes, Li Wei admitted he couldn't have tolerated it either. If Gandalf had been here, he would no doubt have muttered, "Foolish Thorin," and then lit his pipe while thinking of a solution. Your Majesty, you know dwarves aren't very good at communication, Li Wei began. Of course I know. Thranduil had no patience for reasoning just then and cut him off. They are stubborn as stone, and they broke their oath first. What right does he have to accuse me of standing by and doing nothing? Even if I let them go, even if everything went smoothly, the end result would be another king driven mad, Li Wei said quietly. There was nothing more to be said. The dwarves' actions were indefensible. They had broken their promise, and that ancient greed was the root of the feud between elves and dwarves. If anyone could be blamed for it reaching such extremes, it was Sauron. The ring he gave the dwarves only made their desires pathological. Still, aside from the dwarves, Li Wei had been worrying about something else from the start. I noticed some injuries on your Majesty's face earlier. Thranduil paused, surprised Li Wei had noticed. Those are wounds from dragon's breath. They never fully healed. The king's true face was hideous beneath the glamour, a large portion scarred by burns. He normally hid it with magic, so people only saw the illusion. To Li Wei, who was attuned to such things, Thranduil's vital signs always seemed incomplete, like a health bar that never quite returned to full. Li Wei produced a golden apple, and the king's gaze sharpened. Elves are highly sensitive to magic. This is a small gift, Li Wei said. A token of my regard. I hope it can help with your injury. It is beautiful, and I can feel the magic inside, healing power. But to rely on it alone to cure this wound. Thranduil's voice trailed off. Even among elves, he was skilled in magic. Many elves could do healing. Yet this burn had resisted all efforts, which showed how deep the damage ran. Why not try? It can't hurt. Li Wei urged. Thranduil hesitated a moment, then bit. It did not taste metallic as one might expect from something golden. It was sweet and fragrant. Magic swelled in his mouth, and a soothing, pervasive healing power began to flow through him. The illusion concealing his face wavered and fell away. The red, scarred flesh, the mark of the dragon's breath, stirred under the apple's influence, reacting with pain and itching as it fought the new magic. Slowly, the golden apple's healing converged on the wound. The clash of magics faded in the apple's favor. The lingering taint of dragon's breath dissipated. Flesh regrew where it had been burned. Skin smoothed. The king drew several deep breaths and ran his fingers over a face he had not felt was whole in a very long time. Looks like it worked, Li Wei said casually, as if it had been nothing. It really healed. I am in your debt, Li Wei. Thranduil's gratitude was quiet but sincere. This burn has plagued me for so long. Woodland Realm reputation, current reputation, 1000, ally. From now on, you are an ally of the Woodland Realm. If you ever need assistance, you may come and ask. The Woodland Realm will respond. The king's words were short but weighty. The reputation increase confirmed Thranduil's seriousness. It was not empty flattery. Before, the Woodland Realm had respected Li Wei's strength and contributions, but now they regarded him as a true ally, someone they would marshal troops to support if necessary. Thank you, Li Wei replied. Help should go both ways. If you ever need anything, I will not hold back. He changed the subject. I hear there are elven gems in the Lonely Mountain. Thranduil blinked. The human's topic change was abrupt and touchy. Those are no ordinary gems. They mean a great deal to me. I have tried many times to reclaim them, but always returned empty-handed. With the mountain now occupied by that evil dragon, the chances have only grown slimmer. What if I can bring them back? Li Wei asked. Then you will have a king's promise, Thranduil said after a pause. About the dwarves, he went on, surprising Li Wei. I know you are traveling with them. I can guarantee their safety, but until my objective is achieved, I will not let them leave. I understand. Li Wei nodded. But not everyone among them feels the same. Other than Thorin, there are those who can be reasoned with. I will give your words serious thought, Thranduil replied. Given the history, new wounds layered on old grievances, simply freeing the dwarves was impossible. Li Wei could have burst open the jail himself, but he wasn't sure what chaos that might bring, and perhaps it would be someone else's action. The conversation with the king ended shortly after. Li Wei thanked the monarch and left the throne hall, asking an elf for directions toward the prison. The jail is this way, the elf told him. As he walked to discuss the day's events with the dwarves, a sudden clamor drew him off the path. A group of elves were gathered by a storeroom, laughing and chattering. We are planning a feast, someone announced. A familiar voice came from behind. Li Wei turned to see Legolas, casually holding a piece of fruit. Bilbo, Legolas greeted, then smiled at Li Wei. The Starlight Feast is our custom, 7 days from now. You are most welcome to attend. Li Wei shook his head. I'm afraid not. I still have much to do. 7 days would be the day he'd arranged to meet Gandalf at Dol Guldur. Even aside from that appointment, his companions remained imprisoned. To go to a feast now would feel wrong. Before he could say more, someone approached them, Bilbo Baggins. Chapter 67, Dynamic Sword Skills. Li Wei politely declined Legolas's invitation and followed Bilbo to a more private spot. What happened? He asked. I went to see Thorin and the dwarves, Bilbo answered with a small sigh. He explained that as soon as he left the king's throne, he had gone to visit them and had just run into Li Wei on his way back. After a brief account of the dwarves' situation, Bilbo hesitated. Thorin actually entrusted me with something. And did you accept? I haven't agreed yet. It's a difficult task, so I wanted to ask your opinion. He fumbled for words. Let me think. There's the Starlight Feast in 7 days, Li Wei interrupted casually. All the elves are looking forward to it, and the guards will be distracted. They'll be drunk by then. He patted the hobbit's shoulder. Bilbo, you know what to do. Li Wei then reached into his pack and produced a golden apple, its surface gleaming smoothly. This uses healing power. It can cure almost every wound. He placed it in Bilbo's hand. I trust you'll know when to use it. No, you should keep it. You fight more than I do. You need it more than I do. Bilbo protested, clearly uneasy at accepting something so valuable. You will keep it, Bilbo. Li Wei's gaze was steady and calm. Bilbo felt something unsaid in that look. His throat worked as he finally let the decision through. All right, I understand. Thank you, Bilbo said. I've already thought about how to proceed. The gift in Li Wei's trust steadied Bilbo. He was no longer the homesick hobbit who clung to comforts. He had his own resolve. I'll do it. I said I'd help reclaim their homeland. I'm glad, Li Wei replied. With 7 days until the feast, Li Wei parted ways with Bilbo and then went to see the dwarves himself, asking about their plans. Why don't you just dig us out? One of them whispered. Li Wei pointed at the guards clustered by the gate. I can dig you out, but you might not be able to get away. He could, if he wanted, forcibly remove them, but the fallout could be anything from a bruised reputation for the woodland realm to a major incident. You won't rot away here forever. Don't forget, I'm not the only one outside. The dwarves exchanged looks and fell quiet. They all knew who he meant, Bilbo, the burglar Thorin had confided in. The secret wasn't known to the elves, but to the dwarves it confirmed that a plan was in motion. Don't worry, this isn't the end of your journey. Li Wei had learned to speak in hints, and the dwarves understood. All they needed now was to wait for the burglar. And you? Killy asked. What about you, Li Wei? I have a few things to take care of. If time allows, I'll meet you afterward. He left it at that. After sorting that for the moment, Li Wei stepped out of the prison and looked back at the palace, then slapped his forehead. I completely forgot about this, he muttered. He found an elf to guide him through the underground palace and successfully unlocked the synthesis recipe for the wood elf equipment. Recipes were never a bad thing. Collecting as many as possible was always useful. Apart from stylistic differences, the wood elf gear was similar in strength to other sets, nothing world-shattering, but every new recipe mattered. More interesting to Li Wei than the equipment was the training ground. The elves' long lifespans gave them time to refine their skills. Many were seasoned fighters. In the woodland realm, where combat was frequent, training grounds were common and the swordsmanship on display was impressive. The elves' techniques were fluid and precise, moves any one of them could perform with deadly grace. Watching, Li Wei thought of a mod he had once played. He'd noticed a pattern. New mods tended to appear when he encountered the thing the mod represented. While mulling that over, his gaze landed on a familiar figure, Legolas, training with a focused, almost sullen intensity. The younger elf's swordplay flowed like water and light. Li Wei couldn't help himself. "Impressive," he said. Legolas stopped and bowed his head slightly when he saw Li Wei. "Thank you, but I doubt my swordplay could match the wilderness's legends." "Right. For what it's worth, I'd like some combat guidance if possible," Legolas said earnestly. Li Wei rubbed his hands, a little awkward. He wasn't sure what kind of guidance he could offer. His fighting style was more straightforward than elegant. "Honestly, I've never studied formal swordsmanship. I mostly just hack and slash," he admitted. Legolas's surprise was obvious. How could someone who achieved the things Li Wei had without learned techniques? He found Li Wei's candidness baffling, but his curiosity only grew. "Still, I'm very interested in elven combat styles. If you're willing, could you teach me? Or rather, would you let me show you our methods and compare?" "Of course," Li Wei said. He accepted, not because he thought he could teach much, but because he wanted to see. Legolas picked up a practice blade and handed another to Li Wei. They began with a demonstration. Legolas moved through a series of basic but exacting drills: stance, guard, footwork, parry. Then he asked Li Wei to try. Li Wei hesitated at first. He didn't know how to hold back in a spar that wasn't life or death, and the idea of accidentally injuring Legolas was embarrassing. But as the session progressed, Li Wei's worry vanished for a different reason. He couldn't hit him. Legolas was impossibly light, his timing and distance perfect. Li Wei felt like he was trying to catch a bit of drifting dust. The elf's motions were inhumanly smooth. Where Li Wei attacked, the blade slid away. Clang! Another parry exposed the same weakness. After a few more exchanges, Legolas stopped the lesson. At the same moment, a notification appeared in Li Wei's mind. Mod added dynamic swordsmanship. Li Wei's heart skipped. He had only come to try, and somehow the interaction had triggered something entirely new. He looked up at Legolas, who sheathed his practice sword and explained, "Those were the basic techniques. They come from true combat experience and years of training. For someone used to fighting on the battlefield, I think you will pick them up quickly." "That makes sense," Li Wei replied and opened the mod's skill panel. The dynamic swordsmanship mod contained one skill, basic swordsmanship Livbort 1. In game terms, it automatically locked onto enemies, easing aiming. In practice, it meant Li Wei's focus in combat would sharpen and his perception of opponents would become more precise. The mod's skills required skill orbs to unlock and upgrade, drops from killing hostile creatures. In short, to learn and improve, he only needed to keep fighting. "I understand," Li Wei said, feeling a small thrill at the prospect. The path to mastering this would be straightforward. Get into battles, collect orbs, grow stronger. Thanks to Chishulin Ye for the 100 coin reward. Thanks to Guanshan Meng for the 100 coin reward. Thanks to Deep Sea Submarine in the Sky for the 500 coin reward. Thanks to Ice Sealed Moo for the 500 coin reward. And thanks to everyone who voted. Thank you for your support. Li Wei rewarded Legolas, who had shown his combat skills without reserve and even helped him unlock new modules, with a golden apple. Elves liked such things. They were beautiful and useful. Li Wei had given out several golden apples recently, simply because he couldn't think of a better gift that fit in his pack, and he had a decent stock. Besides, who could refuse a golden apple? It appealed to the aesthetic sense of most creatures. Even orcs might find them pleasing. After unlocking basic swordsmanship, Li Wei stopped going to the training ground, which left Legolas puzzled. Why study for a single day and then quit? What pleased the temporary instructor was that Li Wei often went off afterward to cut down spiders and wandering orcs in the forest. He always muttered something about farming things that no one understood, but everyone saw his work. Whatever he called it, it helped the woodland realm, and that alone earned respect. The drop rate today is ridiculous, Li Wei complained as he cut through another spider, his face drawn. Over the past days, he had slain hundreds of spiders, cleared several nests, and filled his pack with spider eyes, yet he had only found one basic swordsmanship orb and one dodge orb. After upgrading basic swordsmanship to level 2 and dodge to level 1, he sheathed his sword and returned to the woodland realm. Tomorrow was the Starlight Feast, the day they'd agreed to gather. I sense many orcs ambushing along the eastern border of the forest. They seem to be searching for something, he told the king when he arrived. To the east lay the river running to Long Lake Town, an important trade route for the elves. Orcs lurking there were bad news. Li Wei delivered his intelligence to Thranduil, who promised to take it seriously, then set off for Dol Guldur. The day after Li Wei left, the woodland realm held a grand feast. Elves bore barrel after barrel of fine wine into the hall and raised their cups in celebration, but on that auspicious day, trouble came. "Those dwarves have escaped," a messenger announced. Thranduil set his goblet down, his mood gone. "Legolas, lead a team and go." He paused as if remembering something and added, "Clear out the orcs in that vicinity. Don't let them ruin our banquet." "What about the dwarves?" Legolas asked. "Ignore them. Let them go with the river. Their fate is their own. I do not care." The king's voice was cool. Then he added, "When you clear the orcs, bring one back alive. I have questions for him." Legolas accepted the order and led a company toward the river mouth. Thranduil sat on his throne, thoughtful. Dol Guldur, once a dwelling of the Wood Elves that had been abandoned when they migrated north in the Second Age, had in the Third Age become occupied by a dark force. On the surface, it looked dilapidated and silent, but that was a facade. Even rumors of a necromancer may have been deliberately spread to confuse outsiders and buy time. Li Wei walked on withered branches and decaying leaves, edging toward the fortress gate. "Gandalf," he called. "Are you late?" "No." A voice came from behind a stone pillar. Li Wei turned and saw Gandalf and Radagast emerging together. "A wizard is never late," Gandalf said with his familiar tone. "Exactly. With my rabbits, only other people are late." Radagast added cheerfully, "I can almost confirm it, Li Wei. The great enemy is here." Gandalf leaned in, his voice low. The three circled together and discussed the situation. "This place is shrouded in a hidden spell. That suggests he hasn't regained his full strength and does not dare to appear openly. Radagast, go and send a message to the Lady of the Golden Wood. We must force the great enemy out. Do not under any circumstances follow us in, understood? Li Wei and I are enough to investigate here." Gandalf's eyes were steady. Radagast blinked, so they were making him run an errand. All right, I'll go." He climbed into his rabbit cart and hurried away. Watching him go, Li Wei asked, "What now? We go straight in?" "We have no other choice. We'll go in and scout. If anything goes wrong, we retreat immediately." Gandalf drew Glamdring, staff in his left hand, sword in his right, and led the way. Li Wei fell in behind, watching their backs. Seeing Gandalf with staff and sword, an old phrase crossed Li Wei's mind. Wandering the world with a sword, a staff, and a blade cutting paths to the ends of the earth. "Shouldn't we wait for reinforcements?" he suggested. Recalling some battle scenes still made him uneasy. Even as a weakened remnant, Sauron's power remained considerable. Li Wei wasn't sure his armor would hold if a fight broke out. "No time. I must know what Sauron is planning." The usually cautious Gandalf had decided, for once, to be reckless. "All right, if anything feels wrong, we run. Don't stay." "I will. Trust me, my life is still useful. I won't throw it away carelessly." They pushed deeper into the ruined fortress. The sky there was permanently overcast. Day and night had little distinction. Piles of iron cages hung on both sides of the path, filled with withered bones of all sizes. People had been tortured here until death. Often the only reason was the orcs' enjoyment of pain. "This is where Thrain was once imprisoned," Gandalf said, looking up at the cages. "I met him when I came here long ago." He shook his head. He was held and tormented for 5 years. No one knows what he suffered. When I found him, he was incoherent and couldn't remember who he was. He gave me a key and a map, and soon after he died. As Gandalf, the walking encyclopedia of Middle-earth, spoke, a shadow flicked past. Leeway spun but saw nothing. Gandalf was about to ask when, suddenly, a sword flashed from behind and came down with brutal force. Clang! Leeway's nameless blade and Gandalf's Glamdring rang out as they met the strike together, stopping a killing blow aimed at the wizard. Chapter 69, Ringwraiths. A translucent, shadowy figure materialized out of thin air. Ringwraiths, Gandalf said, a single word. Hiss! The ringwraith screamed like something from the nether and charged. Gandalf dropped to one side to avoid it. Leeway blurred to the left with his evasion, almost like a phantom, narrowly escaping the blow. Boom! Gandalf thrust his staff upward, and a bright white light burst from its tip, driving the ringwraith back. Leeway seized the moment, drawing his longsword and slashing forward. The blade struck true. Fire engulfed the spectre. Flame was what ringwraiths feared most. The creature shrieked in agony, recoiled several steps, and dissolved back into shadow. Luckily, our swords are blessed by elves, Gandalf said. These ringwraiths can't be harmed by ordinary weapons. Careful! A whisper of breath slipped past Leeway's ear, followed by a poisonous black mist that crawled into his chest like an abyss. He felt panic and rot crawling over him. Status: Feather. Poisons. Be brave. A flash of white swept through and banished the negative effects from his status bar. Leeway shook himself clear and swung his sword behind him, but the spirit had already vanished into the dark. The ring of fire on Gandalf's hand pulsed warmth. Under its glow, Leeway felt courage flood back through him. Black breath, Gandalf explained, the ringwraith's evil magic. Those afflicted fall gravely ill. If a Morgul blade then cuts them and they have no cure, they can be dragged into the shadow and become like the wights. Perhaps the wights of the ancient tomb are tied to their arts. Both men were now on full alert, eyes sweeping every shadow for ambush. Leeway felt especially unsettled. His netherite alloy armor had long made him feel invulnerable to ordinary attacks, but it could not stop magical damage or mental assaults. That was a wizard's domain. Get ready, Leeway! What? Prepare to attack. Gandalf slammed his staff into the ground and chanted in an ancient tongue, "Let all darkness be revealed." A massive halo, denser than any detection spell, burst out from him and rolled over the nearby buildings. Gandalf's face paled, not from the spell's cost, but because what he'd revealed chilled him. 9 transparent figures swirled up from the shadow realm. Leeway struck immediately. He hit one ringwraith twice, tearing its armor and setting its cloak alight. The attack worked. Its form collapsed and dissipated. Ringwraiths could be dispersed, not truly killed. Their forms could rebuild after time, but for now it was gone. Gandalf followed with a concussive blast that forced another wraith back into shadow. The remaining 7 reacted. 3 pressed toward Gandalf. 4 moved to encircle Leeway. Because of the ring of fire on Gandalf's hand, the ringwraiths moved. Black breath no longer took hold. The 4 could not afflict Leeway with fear or poison again. These were once kings, powerful men whose bodies had been twisted into servants of darkness. Their instincts and tactics remained. Even a single one, in a fair fight, would be dangerous. Leeway's swordsmanship and focus let him parry and trade blows against the encirclement, but ringwraiths had other weapons. A wraith in grotesque armor let out a howl that numbed Leeway's mind and stole his focus. Clang! Outnumbered and hit by the mental attack, a gap opened. A Morgul blade seized the chance, striking Leeway's armor with a metallic ring. For a moment he thought his armor had saved him, but the blade flashed, and with a wet sound it bypassed the protection and cut skin. Damage 3. Status: Wither. Morgul poison, infinite. The armor's physical defense held thanks to its protection enchantment, reducing the impact, but it couldn't stop the Morgul curse. A fragment of the blade remained in his flesh, his chest felt wrong, and his vision swam. Magical wounds could ignore armor, only a protection enchantment helped at all. "What is this thing?" he gasped. "Leeway!" Gandalf yelled. He forced the 3 wraiths around him back and rushed to Leeway, blasting away the one that had wounded him. Leeway turned and cut the wraith with flame, driving it back into shadow. "Run!" Gandalf ordered. Leeway didn't hesitate. He sprinted after him, downing a bottle of milk as he ran. Milk was still the invincible cure. His debuffs vanished and the odd sensation in his chest eased. "Where are you running, scum?" A heavy hammer slammed down and a pale figure strode forward, bossing a surge of orcs. The creatures crowded in, weapons raised, sensing Sauron's will like molten streams from Mount Doom. Sauron's presence filled their minds and stifled their fear unless the enemy inspired a greater terror. "Azog, healed and getting bolder?" Li Wei taunted. The pale orc's chest swelled with fury. "You'll die here today." He spun his hammer. Li Wei sidestepped with evasion and exchanged blows with him. After a few strikes, Azog felt it. This human was stronger than expected. "Go! Kill them!" Azog barked, stepping back behind his troops. If his minions could swarm the two, why risk himself? Orcs in standardized armor surged in from all sides, closing the ring. Ring-wraiths slipped among them and perched on the walls as if spectating the slaughter. "We'll fight our way out," Li Wei said. He popped a golden apple and downed several potions. He could no longer hold back his trump cards. One by one, the bottles emptied, and a stack of buffs bloomed on his status bar. Speed 2, Strength 2, Regeneration 2. The Tier 2 potions were short-lived but potent. Li Wei felt he could take on a dozen orcs barehanded. "Li Wei, come quickly." Gandalf grabbed his cloak, and with a flash of white light, the two vanished from their spot, leaving no trace. Thanks to Icebound Mu for the 1,500 coin reward, to Zhou Ye Zhou for the 1,700 coin reward, to I Am Teacher Wang Not Teacher Huang for the 500 coin reward, to Pochian Shendi Quangba for the 500 coin reward, to Desolate Traveler for the 100 coin reward, to Admiral Hipper for the 100 coin reward, to Anan Lo for the 100 reading coin reward, and thanks to all friends who voted. Thank you for your support. Chapter 70, Sauron. "Gandalf, why didn't you use this before? All those potions I just drank were wasted," Li Wei shouted, breathless. Gandalf's face contorted into an awkward smile. "Aha! Well, you can't use this trick often. It isn't without cost." He didn't finish. His feet kept moving, and the two of them ran on. Behind them, the army surged, crashing down the road. Gandalf spun his staff and smashed the top of a nearby watchtower. Huge stones fell, crushing a pack of pursuing orcs and blocking the road. "Are we safe?" Li Wei barely had time to think before wisps of black mist coalesced in front of them. A void illusion bloomed, a giant all-black eye that filled the path. In its center, a burned figure stood wreathed in flame, Sauron. Li Wei's HUD showed an impossible readout. Checked. No health bar. Not Sauron's true body, just a projection. The potion's effects on Li Wei still had dozens of seconds remaining. He felt the last of their impetus and bit into another golden apple. "No light can drive out darkness, wizard," Sauron murmured from the boiling blackness. The mist surged like a wave toward Li Wei, as if meant to take him first. He reacted without thinking, swinging his elven ancient sword. The blade sliced clean through the black vapor and held the impact. "Human?" "No," Sauron hissed. "Whatever you are, stay here," Gandalf barked. The black mist expanded, devouring the surrounding buildings. Gandalf slammed his staff down and conjured a thick barrier of light. Everything outside that dome was pulverized. Only the ground beneath Gandalf and Li Wei remained whole. "Hurry, go get reinforcements," Gandalf roared, holding the line. "I just drank a potion. I'm not letting it go to waste." Li Wei snapped. The potion's timer was ticking down. With a grin that was half insanity, he lunged at Sauron's phantom, drew his longsword, and slashed at the eye. Clang. The blade struck like it hit bedrock. For the first time, the elven sword showed a durability bar. The fiery figure in the pupil recoiled. The surrounding black mist shuddered. Then Sauron's anger exploded. The mist blackened the sky, eclipsing sun and light. 9 shadows stepped from the pupil, ringwraiths, reforged and strengthened by Sauron's nearness. Each was a black mist-infused horror, everyone amplified into a mini-boss. Gandalf's barrier shrank to a thread. Li Wei, moving faster than he ever had, planted several lit TNT blocks, hastily stacked a stone wall, and yanked Gandalf back. Boom! Explosions ripped outward, scattering the ringwraiths and opening a thin seam in the enveloping mist. It worked, but only briefly. The wraiths refolded their forms almost instantly. With Sauron literally at their spawn point, they needed no long resurrection. Here they reformed in moments, stronger than before. They were like an unkillable monster spawner. Gandalf pushed up his barrier once more, but the effort drained him. He sidled a look at Li Wei, pleading for a solution. Li Wei snapped off a quick smile. Gandalf, take this. He produced an ender pearl and thrust it at the old wizard. He'd scavenged 7 in all, 3 farmed in the eerie forest, 4 bought from piglins after a frustrating trade that had nearly had him slaughtering the lot. Ender pearls were too scarce to waste. What? Gandalf panted, bewildered. A teleportation item. Throw it and you'll be sent to where it lands. But we're trapped. The light around Gandalf flickered. The staff in his hand glowed faintly, doing nothing like the last shield. It was being used to resist Sauron's pressure. The older wizard's staff creaked. Its durability showed a tiny number, 3. I'll make an opening, Li Wei said. He stacked TNT behind them, sparked the fuses, and erected a stone wall to blunt the blast. Sauron noticed the red glow and tried to snuff it out. Black mist swept forward and slapped the lit TNT away. But Li Wei had already switched to his fishing rod. He cast the line after the drifting TNT. The hook latched on, and he reeled it back. As the lit block returned into the cluster, the chain reaction blew a crater that tore through the mist. The blast ripped apart Li Wei's hastily built wall. Gandalf jabbed his staff into the gap and pushed, and at last an exit opened. Just a sliver. Quick! Gandalf shouted and hurled his pearl. Li Wei followed, hurling his own. They erupted into purple particles, and then the exit winked out. The mist slammed back like a fist. Both were thrown to the ground. Gandalf was pinned to the wall, unable to rise. Sauron's hostility sank its full weight into Li Wei. The dark force slammed him against the tower, snapping one building after another. With each impact, Li Wei's health plummeted, the images dragging him back to fights with skeletal Draugr months ago when he had no gear. He hadn't been beaten like this in a long time. He gorged himself on golden apples, then even rifled for 2 lembas, anything to keep his life above 0. If he had been short on supplies, he might already be dying. Sauron gathered himself for the killing blow, power coalescing into a single strike, but at that moment, the place they'd been standing bloomed with a cloud of purple particles. Gandalf and Li Wei were gone. Chapter 71, Accelerated Music. Oh, I think I twisted my ankle. As soon as he landed, Gandalf cried out, grimacing and hopping twice. Li Wei, by contrast, was mostly fine. The fall had been cushioned, and the teleportation pearl had only inflicted minor damage. You don't look hurt either, Gandalf added. Li Wei almost believed him, if not for how Gandalf actually moved. The old wizard was limping now, leaning on his staff, one hand pressed to his side. The strain was still considerable, Li Wei said. That much is obvious. While they fought Sauron, Li Wei had seen Gandalf's vitality ebb. Now the wizard rose slowly, wincing. Li Wei couldn't just stand there and watch, so he handed Gandalf a golden apple. Thank you. I already feel better. This is quite a marvelous thing. My strength feels restored, Gandalf said. A warm glow spread through him, the apple's magic forming a golden shield around the wizard. Good, let's get out of here. They had only just entered the forest when the shadow over Dol Guldur expanded like a living thing, blotting out the sun as it surged toward them. Get down! Gandalf slammed his staff to the ground and threw up a small, transparent shield that covered them both. The black mist swept over from above, uprooting trees, but it found no target and receded with a sullen hiss. Li Wei looked up and watched a torrent of orcs and wargs pour out of Dol Guldur like water from a broken dam, sweeping northward, tens of thousands, by rough estimate. He even saw a pale figure riding a massive warg, Azog, leading the charge. They're moving out. I see them, Gandalf said, rising to his feet and looking toward the advancing host. These are orcs and wargs from Moria, and there are ogres among them. They're marching toward Erebor. Smaug is allied with Sauron. They mean to take the mountain in force. Li Wei, I must hurry to meet Lady Galadriel and the others so we can strike at Dol Guldur again. What will you do? Li Wei asked as they began to move. Gandalf turned the question back on him. You? I don't think you need to come with me. You don't have the strength to face him yet. I think you do, Gandalf replied with quiet certainty. Then, after a moment, he changed the subject. But given the current situation, there are places where you are needed more. Erebor. Sauron's army was moving on the lonely mountain ahead of schedule, while the dwarves were still debating in Long Lake Town. Li Wei straightened. It's incredible. My injury's healed. Kili sat in Bard's chair, testing his leg. Thank you, Toriel, and Bilbo. On the road to Long Lake, Kili had been struck by a Morgul arrow. Bilbo had given him a golden apple, whose healing power and shield had held the wound from worsening. Toriel arrived shortly after and used Kingsfoil to purge the Morgul poison completely. Hearing Kili thank them, Bilbo shook his head. Don't thank me. This apple was given to me by Li Wei. Save your thanks for when he arrives. So I've been saved by Li Wei again, Kili said, his expression a mix of gratitude and something wilder. Before Kili could think further, Thorin stepped up and cut him off. We will repay him. For now, the urgent thing is to go to Erebor. Dwarves, are you really determined to go to the Lonely Mountain? Legolas asked, stepping forward and addressing Thorin. That's our affair, Thorin snapped. What has it to do with you, elf? Thorin's bluntness was his constant defense. Did you two follow us here to seize us and drag us back? Even if you've done us a favor, one thing is one thing. We won't be taken away against our will. If it comes to it, we will fight. No, I was not ordered to take you back, Legolas replied, frowning. Seeing the elf's hesitation, Toriel spoke up. We tracked the orc band that ambushed us at the forest border all the way here, but we don't know why they suddenly retreated. That tracking mission is complete. Thorin glanced at Toriel, then at Kili, and swallowed the rest of his retort. Then there was no need for you to come find us at all. Thorin's nephew always seemed to like harder company than other dwarves. Perhaps there were too few women among their kin. Thorin thought they might need a word with him later. For now, however, Thorin issued his order. Everyone's well enough. We'll make preparations tonight and depart for Erebor at dawn. Thorin, is it too early? Shouldn't we wait for Gandalf and Li Wei? Fili asked. We can reach there just as quickly if we go first. I don't want to waste time here. But we have no weapons. What if something happens on the way? There will be, Thorin said simply. As the dwarves debated, Legolas and Toriel sat aside, exchanging puzzled looks. What did the dwarves have in mind? Bard looked equally perplexed. What are you planning? There's no place to buy weapons in town. Ah, nothing. We're just discussing leaving, Thorin hedged. You've put us to one side long enough. It's time to go, another dwarf said, evasive. Balin had been listening and was about to speak when something behind Bard caught his eye. He changed tack immediately. Brother, that piece you have there looks peculiar, very sturdy. That's not a clothesline. Oh, Balin seized the opening and moved closer, curiosity written across his face. What is it? A family heirloom? It is. Balin's interest sharpened. A clothesline as a family heirloom seemed absurd until Bard gently stroked the object and explained, this was left by my father. When the dragon attacked Riverdale, my father used this arrow to shoot at the dragon. Balin's eyes widened as he recognized the item. He had heard tales of such black arrows. So you're a descendant of the former Lord of Riverdale. He examined the arrow more closely, and the craftsmanship told him everything. This was dwarven work. The black arrows were rumored to be enchanted, hard to misplace, and fated to return to their owner's hand. This was no fake. What you say doesn't quite match the rumors, Balin added, more gently now. If the dragon was truly struck, why does it still dwell in Erebor? The dragon was shot, Bard insisted, voice rising. My father, he certainly shot it. All right, brother, don't get so agitated. I believe you, Balin said, putting a calming hand on Bard's arm. That black arrow is indeed formidable. It could pierce dragon scale and may well have wounded Smaug. But in the end, the dragon is still alive. Whether it was you or your father, you are brave warriors. You have not failed anyone. Let it rest. This is past. What matters is now, our lives and who we are today. Thanks to Shushan Yali Da for the 500 coin reward, to Deng Budao Shihai Tianji Weilan for the 100 coin reward, to Reader 124411 2383940 for the 500 coin reward, and thanks to everyone who voted and supported the story. The Aoke army from Moria set out at first light. Gandalf, having been freed from Sauron, waited anxiously for the White Council's support, while the dwarves pressed on ahead to Erebor to begin preparations. The pace quickened, just like Li Wei's footsteps. The timeline felt off. Why? The only real difference he had made so far was rescuing Gandalf early, preventing his imprisonment and torture by Sauron. That act had exposed Sauron's plans ahead of time. Perhaps the Dark Lord sensed a looming crisis and abandoned his dormancy in preparations, choosing instead to march on Erebor immediately. On a high hill at the border of the Woodland Realm, Li Wei looked down at the dark, surging mass of orcs. The numbers were staggering, clearly more than just the army from Moria. Orcs from the surrounding wilds had been rounded up as well. He squinted and watched a small contingent merge with the Aoke army. A tall orc ran up to Azog, paused, and then joined the main host. If he wasn't mistaken, that was Azog's son, Bolg. Now the army had two leaders, a commander and a second. Rubbing the sword at his hip, Li Wei felt an itch to strike, and an old legend flared in his mind. According to the tales, the sword Orcrist had once been wielded by Ecthelion, the lord of the Fountain of Gondolin. At Gondolin's fall, he had cut down thousands of orcs, slain 2 chieftains and 3 Balrogs, and finally met his end, fighting Gothmog the Balrog chief. From then on, orcs trembled at the sight of Orcrist, and the name of the Lord of the Fountain carried dread even into later ages. That elf lord of the First Age had been formidable, by legend, far stronger than Li Wei was now. He doubted he could match those feats. It was a pity, but not yet. Facing that vast army, Li Wei shook his head. If it had been only a few hundred or 1,000, he might have tried something daring. Tens of thousands, however, could encircle and kill him. There would be nowhere to hide. There were ways to decapitate such a force, but whether it was worth the cost was another matter. Right now, Erebor was the priority. Arriving sooner would allow better defenses. Thorin, far away at Long Lake, had the same thought. Under cover of night, a band of dwarves slipped from the town, unknown to Bard, and circled around to the back of the armory. "Thorin, are we sure about this?" Bilbo whispered. "It's someone else's armory." "No time for hesitation, Master Baggins." Thorin drew a blade from the armory, inspected it, and nodded. "We're only borrowing a few weapons for the time being. Besides, I hear the town's master and guards aren't exactly honorable. Taking these might be doing the townsfolk a favor." In short order, the dwarves armed themselves and slipped away before dawn, leaving for Erebor. The next day, however, a misfortune fell on Bard. A smug-looking man blocked the archer's path and called his name with a bold air. Bard looked at him coldly. "Alfred, what do you want?" "Oh, Bard, of course." Alfred clapped, and a squad of guards appeared. "Weapons have been stolen from the armory. I suspect you, or someone you're sheltering, is involved. Come with me to the dungeon and explain yourself, Master Bard." "Seize him." Alfred gave the order as if it were a done thing. Bard protested. "I didn't do this." Bard had no idea what the dwarves had done. To him, it was simply the master's excuse to get rid of him. This day had been inevitable. "Alfred," Bard called, and his full name usage startled the assistant. "Bane, take care of the family." After giving instructions to his son, Bard went with the guards without resistance. It was a human-made disaster he could not avert. Evasion would be meaningless for now. "Let me see what tricks you have." Clatter. Li Wei swung his pickaxe, broke open Erebor's main gate, and slipped through the front entrance. It was hard to imagine, but even those several-meter-thick stone walls had not stopped Smaug. The dragon had once charged through, collapsing the gate effortlessly. To stop Smaug now would require far more than ordinary defenses, a stone barrier tens of meters, perhaps dozens, thick. If Smaug were still dozing in the deepest cellars, that would be an opportunity. The dragon would have to pass along a long tunnel, burst into the meeting hall, and then reach the main gate to get out. In theory, if that path could be blocked, Smaug could be trapped, or at least delayed for a very long time. He moved forward, studying possibilities. Beyond the hall stood a colossal dwarf statue of gold, so much that if it were melted it could form a small river. Hammered into bricks, it would fill countless chests. No wonder Smaug had been awed when it first saw this hoard. Dwarf wealth here was unparalleled. Li Wei kept his hands off the statue. Rashly touching what belonged to others invited trouble, and the world kept silent records. Past the golden statue, the long corridor led into Smaug's lair. The craftsmanship alone impressed him. The passage stretched for thousands of meters. He set a bucket of lava and a bucket of water on a raised stone, tipped them down the shaft. The molten red lava cascaded down and pooled on the floor. A pour of water beside it hissed and turned the downward flow into rock. He repeated the process until the exit of the passage from the meeting hall was blocked by a thick wall of stone, rising like a cliff where air had been. Not enough. He dug into the floor, buried the TNT he had, and covered it with stone, the rest of his inventory laid down. I'll help you shape the terrain afterward. He considered other defenses. Arrow traps would be useless, lava traps even more so. Smog was a fire drake. A wall of flame or boiling rock would be nothing more than a bath. What else could stop a dragon? He thought through the options. Are your little tricks complete, human? Came a voice behind him. A massive wave of heat rolled over Leeway from the corridor, and he turned. Chapter 73. Dragons and Spells. Whoosh! Scorching flame washed over Leeway, heating the stone walls until they glowed red and the air shimmered with heat. He shoved his longsword out of the way, the metal sizzling as it passed through the lingering blaze. A hot breath sucked into his lungs and a chill ran down his spine. If he hadn't reacted instantly, he would have been hurled skyward. Fortunately, he had already downed a bottle of fire resistance potion. The dragon's breath was terrifyingly strong. Without it, he would never have held his ground. Oh, a human who doesn't fear fire. From deep inside the tunnel, a tremendous commotion rolled toward him. A hurricane of wind and sound swept through, and a mountain of a body blocked the far end of the corridor. A colossal dragon lowered its head, a single eye larger than a man's hut, fixed on the tiny figure below. The pupil brimmed with curiosity, and for the moment the dragon held its attack. Are you the little bug the Dark Lord spoke of? Do you think not fearing fire is enough to deal with me? Naive. Ha! The dragon's mouth split into a wicked grin. Leeway guesstimated its length at well over 100 meters, the largest fire drake of the Third Age, and the last of its kind. Are you Smog? It is I, your master, little bug. Why have you come? For treasure? Something in the mountain? Or were you sent as a snack? I've been waiting for you for a long time, but I don't see what makes you, the one the Dark Lord mentioned, any different from others, apart from some fire resistance. Perhaps I'm not whom you mean. What Dark Lord? I've never heard of him. Ha! Smog lifted and lowered its head, switching its stare back to Leeway. You want to trick information from Great Smog. Don't think I don't know your plan. Who sent you? Yourself? No, that's unlikely. You must have some purpose. You blocked the passage. Are you afraid I'll get out? Why would you be afraid of me escaping? Afraid of the human towns outside? Sk. The dragon had turned talkative and cunning. Leeway kept his tone casual while, with a practiced hand, he assembled a pressure plate from his pack. I thought you were long dead or sleeping. There's been no word of dragons beyond the mountains for ages. I was asleep a few days ago, Smog admitted. But someone woke me up and offered a very good deal. Want to guess what it was? I'm not interested, Leeway said, deliberately dismissive. The dragon, far from giving up, continued with relish. He told me darkness would sweep the land, and then I would be king under the mountain, ruler of the entire north. I heard the king under the mountain was a dwarf. At that, Smog straightened and flexed, showing off its vast bulk. Now look closely. Who better for that title? Leeway looked up at the dragon's massive frame, but his eyes swept over the scales and paused on a tiny gap among the fire-glowing plates. In that opening, a hard diamond had been embedded like a substitute scale, protecting the flesh beneath. He noted the detail and remained outwardly casual. Very impressive, he said. Say a few more flattering words, and you might spare me. Do not dream of resistance, tiny human. Even the old heroes fell to me. The world cannot find their like now. Back then I was young and frail, but now I'm stronger than ever. My scales are harder than 10 layers of shield, my teeth like steel, my claws like spears, my tail sweeps like thunder, my wings bring hurricanes, and my breath brings death. What is your name, human? The dragon suddenly lowered its head and asked. You may call me Steve. His true name could not be revealed. Leeway knew that many beings in Middle-earth were born with innate magic, dragons in particular. Smog's long, flowing talk wasn't idle chatter. Its words carried enchantment, intended to bewitch and bend a listener's will. Its gaze itself was a spell that could slowly force obedience. Anyone careless enough to speak their name in its presence could be bound as a servant. Steve? Leeway repeated, playing the fool. I've never heard of that. Any other names? Oh, there are too many. You wouldn't remember them all. Interesting, human. Smog narrowed its eye, testing. None of its spells had taken hold. Li Wei's will was strong. Its belly began to glow faintly, and it opened its maw, ready to strike. Just then a soft chewing sound came near its ear. The audacity, a human eating and drinking while he spoke. The dragon's breath surged involuntarily. Li Wei seized the moment. He drew his longsword and swung with everything behind it. Clang! The blade rang against huge scales and bone. The sound echoed down the tunnel and stung the ears. The unexpected strike jolted the dragon's head. Smog pitched back, crashed into the wall, and recoiled several steps with a thunderous boom. The glowing longsword carried a powerful dispelling property. In the clash of titanic forces, it repelled the dragon's momentum, and for once the beast was the one knocked back. Li Wei couldn't help a wry thought. This armor and this creature's health were both absurdly thick. He felt something of what his opponents had felt facing him. The blow had been powered as well by a Strength 2 potion, and it had hit the relatively thin part of the dragon's head. Good news, the dragon had a health bar. Bad news, it was enormous. Stinking bug! Smog roared in fury. You have angered me! Its belly flared brilliant red, and another dragon's breath poured out, an inferno expanding to fill the tunnel. Fire replaced sight in every direction. The stone began to melt. The blast lasted far longer than a normal dragon's puff. But Li Wei stepped out of the flames as if through a curtain, his netherite alloy armor still cool. This time the dragon was genuinely surprised, not afraid of ordinary fire, and resistant even to a magically heated breath. Even if Li Wei resisted the heat, the force should have harmed him. You are unexpected for a dragon, Smog muttered. The dragon's health briefly surged as if it fed off its own outrage. There's more you haven't seen yet. Seeing the longsword's damage was limited, Li Wei pressed the pressure plate beneath his boot. A faint click, and then the distant thud of a fuse. Something had been ignited under the floor. The TNT he had buried earlier was triggered. What is that? Smog demanded, bewildered. Before it could react, Li Wei had already slipped into a narrow crawl space. He dug behind the dragon's flank and vanished in the blink of an eye. Chapter 74. Remarks on the release length. I just saw the news that it will be released tomorrow around noon, and I'll try to post more updates over the next few days. I can make a promise here. No matter the reception or the reviews, this book will be finished. I will give everyone an ending. A few words about this book. The original inspiration came from the main character's Lord of the Rings mod. The mod's author is a chronic slacker, and after waiting for several years with no update, I felt compelled to write a story about block people exploring Middle-earth to satisfy my imagination. Even if I finish this novel, I suspect the mod author still won't update it, but I can only hope I'll live long enough to play a completed Lord of the Rings mod someday. When I began, I never expected so many readers to stick with it. I thought it would be fine if even one person made it to the end. Now I'm overwhelmed with gratitude. To be honest, writing with a Lord of the Rings theme has been very difficult. Tolkien's world building is so complete that there's little room to maneuver. With the great music in the background, changing too much feels like it would invite divine wrath. Changing too little is boring, and changing enough to be interesting without upsetting the cosmology risks not fitting the setting and earning readers' criticism. Every time I sit down to write, I keep Middle-earth Wiki and countless documentary videos open. The map is always on my desktop, and my timeline feels practically glued to my face. My biggest initial worry was contradicting the original setting and making characters act out of character. So far, most of the feedback I've received has been about other things, chiefly that Li Wei's way of speaking sometimes doesn't match typical fantasy dialogue. I admit that's a fair point, and I've taken great care to refine the dialogue in the chapters that follow. What comforts me is that, despite many imperfections, there haven't been any serious issues with the Middle-earth setting so far. Probably. Thank you sincerely to all the readers for your support and patience. I also want to thank Editor Bacon. Without their help, this book would probably have sunk to the bottom of the ocean, harder to find than the Silmarils thrown into the sea. Thank you. Thank you. May the winds of courage always be with us. Chapter 75. mountain shaking. You burrowing rat. Smog didn't understand the meaning of the strange voice, but what made him even angrier was that the human had slipped away right under his nose. Not only had the intruder escaped, he had even struck him, breaking through his defense. It was an utter humiliation. "Come back here," the dragon roared. His belly glowed red as the gathered breath surged toward the cave mouth. Boom! A series of explosions ripped a several-meter-wide pit in the floor. A pile of TNT, flung up from beneath the earth by the blast, scattered in every direction. Some charges detonated instantly, forcing Smog to lift his paws and hop about. Others hit the dome and shattered the rocks above, pinning his head down. A few more landed on his body and detonated there, leaving him dazed and off balance. Violent blasts and falling stone forced Smog to curl his bulk, fold his wing membranes tight, and flatten himself to the ground, tucking his head in and defending with everything he had. Behind a partition, Li Wei listened to the commotion with grim attention. The explosions didn't last long. His reserves had been only a few stacks of TNT. They looked heavy in his pack, but laid out and detonated all at once, they were short-lived. Still, the destructive power had been significant. "Is it over?" he whispered. Li Wei slipped back through the tunnel he'd dug, poked his head out cautiously, and peered around. The chamber was a wreck. Large pits, collapsed rubble, broken walls, and impact marks from something massive along the sides. Where was the dragon? Kicking aside a chunk of debris, Li Wei stepped forward, lit a torch, and swept the beam across the wreckage. A small mound of fallen stone lay there. For a moment, he thought it moved, a slow, steady undulation. A bad feeling crawled up his spine, and he backed up several steps toward the cave mouth. Crash! Revenge! Revenge! Came a furious roar. "Die! All of you die! Despicable humans! I will kill you!" Rocks flew as the mound was thrust upward. Smog thrust his enormous body out, shaking the cavern as he roared. Thump! He slammed into the wall with such force that the entire mountain trembled. Li Wei, standing the other side of that barrier, staggered and nearly lost his footing. Thump, thump! Again and again the dragon struck, but the wall held firm, refusing to yield. "How is that possible?" Smog hissed, stunned. This didn't feel like a flimsy barrier. If it were only a few meters thick, it should have broken on the first blow. This wasn't a mere wall. It felt like a slab of mountain that had descended from the sky and taken its place. "Don't waste your strength. You can't break through," a voice called from the small 2-meter hole. Smog glared at the figure that had so infuriated him. He breathed a gout of dragon fire straight into the opening, unwilling to listen to the human. The flame swept past, and the figure remained unruffled, as if only a summer breeze had passed by. With a creak, the dragon's huge maw snapped forward. Li Wei ducked and, quick as a shadow, slapped the side of Smog's skull. The blow made the dragon's head ring, but the force of it did little more than sting. The TNT salvo earlier hadn't even nicked a single scale. It had looked dramatic, but the actual damage was negligible, barely 100 points in all. On a creature the size and density of Smog, those explosions were like firecrackers. 18 points to the head, 2 drops of blood, that was all. Hundreds of detonations resulting in dozens of points of damage hadn't even knocked a scale loose. This armor quality was beyond netherite. If he could somehow pry off a scale, Li Wei thought he could forge some formidable armor. He felt a twinge of awe and a headache. He couldn't take the dragon down without technology or a desperate gamble. Technology wasn't an option now, so there remained only desperate measures. "You can't trap me, despicable human, Steve," Smog raged. "The Dark Lord's army is already on the move. They will come and free me. Then you will all face annihilation. I have your scent now. I will hunt you down forever." Boom! The mountain shuddered again. In Lake Town, Bard awoke in the narrow, barred cell of his temporary prison and looked through the iron grating. What was that? He wondered. The market outside bustled as usual. Most people didn't notice the tremor, and if a few did, they paid it no heed. What could possibly be so wrong? Life had been peaceful for so long. Bard rattled the heavy door, heart anxious. "Did you hear that?" On the hidden road behind the lonely mountain, the dwarves halted. "I heard it. It's coming from deep within the mountain," Balin said, pressing his ear to the rock. Thump! He reeled back. "That last one nearly deafened me." Stones trickled down as the mountain shook again. "What's happening?" The dragon! It's awake! Has anything changed on the inside? Did we come all this way for nothing? Panic rippled through the companions. Smaug was awake. How could their plan continue? Quiet, Thorin ordered, forcing the group to still their agitation. Inside, he was the most restless of all, but as a leader, he could not show despair. Even blindfolded, he had to appear confident. We still have time. Do not jump to despair so quickly. After all we have endured and how far we have come, are we to turn back now without at least opening the gate? Just because we fear that damned dragon? We are sons of Durin, a dwarf shouted. Our goal is reclaiming Erebor and restoring our home. We will not rest until it is ours. Balin stepped forward. One by one, the dwarves closed ranks behind him, their faces resolute. We will follow you to the death. But what exactly is happening inside? Others demanded. We cannot move forward blindly. Thorin shut his eyes and considered. When he spoke, he sounded calm, though his chest tightened. Killy, take the key in the map. All of you wait here. I will go to the main gate and see for myself. If all goes well, I will return before Durin's day. He handed Killy the items and turned toward the foot of the mountain. Killy blinked, holding the key like a man in a daze. Where are you going? He asked. To the main gate. The sounds came from that direction. I'll find out what's happened. Thorin gripped his sword and strode down the mountain. Madness and obsession for his homeland had driven him for years. Now that hope hovered within reach, failure would be a torment worse than death. Bilbo, feeling the weight of the ring in his pocket, stepped forward. Thorin, I can. We'll go with you. One by one, the dwarves placed a steadying hand on Bilbo's shoulder and stepped forward to shield him. We are with you, Thorin. Success or death in battle, we will only choose one. Chapter 76, Consumption. We're almost there. Everyone keep quiet. At the main entrance to the lonely mountain, Thorin led the dwarves forward in whispered steps. I remember the way from the map. Follow me. Why is there a hole here? One of them said. Halfway along the path, Thorin's brow knit. This wasn't here before, he muttered. It never appeared in my memory. I think I've seen something like it, but not here, another dwarf replied. The style looks familiar, though. Could it be Leeway? Let's go in. Thorin drew his sword and charged first into the council hall. From somewhere beyond came faint impacts, clashing metal, the occasional dragon roar, and bursts of flame. No way, one of the dwarves guessed. They hurried toward the sounds and came up against an abrupt stone wall. This isn't in my memory either, Thorin said. He shook his head slowly. I remember this as the long corridor that led to the cellars. It never had a wall. Certainly not one this color. It's the same shade as the walls from Leeway's city, Beaufort observed. And look at this puddle, exactly 2 meters long and 2 meters wide. I can almost be certain who did this. A dwarf crouched and touched the water. It was astonishingly clear, like one of the fountains the elves make. There's an opening over there, he added. They abandoned further exploration and gathered around the new aperture. A head peered in, but only darkness answered, with a faint pile of rubble visible at the far end. Should we go in? Thorin nodded and was about to step forward when a red glow flared at the mouth of the opening. Alarm thudded in his chest. Thorin rolled aside and shouted, Back! Flames belched out of the tunnel and vanished in an instant. A dwarf who had been a step too slow had a few strands of beard singed. Then a voice, deep and mocking, carried from the dark, the roar of a great dragon. The hallway shook with massive thuds. Go in and see, somebody yelled. Thorin surged forward. That voice, it was a dragon. Quick, follow, he cried. They ran. A flaming arrow streaked for the dragon's eye, but couldn't even pierce its eyelid. Fire enchantments and blazing bolts had no effect. After all, this was a fire dragon. Its scales were harder than 10 layers of steel shields, and by any game of armor values, exceeded the upper limit. Ordinary bows and crossbows couldn't pierce it. Only one weakness existed, a missing scale over its heart. But Li Wei had already used half the durability of his bow, and couldn't even dislodge the gem lodged there, let alone wound the dragon. You really startled me, Steve. I almost mistook you for a mighty warrior from the ancient days, the dragon taunted. You might know a few spells, but compared to those I remember, you're still far off, it sneered on. Your sword's not bad, if only its wielder weren't you. You're not half the fighter of the one I killed back then, it continued. ridiculing Li Wei even as they clashed. "Shut that stinking mouth before I shove my sword in and make sure you never open it again," Li Wei snapped back. An arrow, wreathed in flames, flew out, was snapped from the air by the dragon, and swallowed. "This little snack tastes pretty good. Any more?" the dragon said, almost playfully. Li Wei's blade rang as he struck at a massive claw. The dragon recoiled with a hiss of pain. "Despicable human!" it roared. The clash and scraping of metal echoed down the dark corridor. Realizing that Li Wei seemed unusually resistant to flame, the dragon seldom used its breath, only doing so out of habit. Instead, it relied on charging, biting, and sweeping with spear-like claws and teeth like polished swords. Its jaws clamped onto Li Wei's armor and actually drew blood. Each bite, claw, and tail sweep chipped at his health, but only to a degree. Compared to the force of Sauron, these blows were still light. Li Wei didn't even need potions. Ordinary food and natural regeneration, with a few evasive maneuvers, were enough to keep him going. Smaug's own health, by contrast, was bleeding away slowly and steadily. While Li Wei's bar dipped and recovered, the dragons showed no positive gain for a long time. If Li Wei could keep grinding like this and somehow block its escape, he might actually kill it. Finding the chance to trap it, however, was difficult. "I must admit, you have some skill," Smaug conceded, changing tactics. It stopped blindly chasing Li Wei and began to maneuver, using hit-and-run strikes. This was no scripted NPC. Smaug was a thinking creature. When it sensed danger, it hid and retreated. When it couldn't win instantly, it tried other strategies. The occasional dragon's breath hanging in the air was as much psychological warfare as anything else. Even if it failed to hurt, the trash talk could unnerve an opponent. "My king, am I dreaming?" a voice whispered. A group of dwarves had appeared at the aperture, with a hobbit huddled in the center. "Li Wei is fighting that 100-meter-long dragon?" one breathed. "They seem evenly matched," another said, awed. Seeing Li Wei hold his own against Smaug left them stunned. His combat power grew in proportion to the opponent, a paradox beyond Bilbo's understanding. The hobbit just stood there with his mouth open. But Thorin's expression turned from wonder to anger. "More than anything else, I want to know why he woke that evil dragon." "This ruins our plans," Thorin snapped. Their plan had been to steal the gems, gather an army, then strike. Waking Smaug had pulled that timeline forward and destroyed the chance for stealth. Li Wei suddenly turned and saw them at the opening. A bad premonition tightened his chest. "Go back!" he shouted. At the same time, a wash of dragon's breath swept past them. The dwarves' reflexes were sharp. They hauled Bilbo and scattered, rolling and diving ungainly to avoid the attack. Water was their only immediate shield. Li Wei grabbed a bucket, flung its contents against the wall, and created a descending curtain of water for cover. Pulling the dwarves with him, he hustled back toward the council hall. Chapter 77, Violent Rescue. How did you get here? Inside the vast, empty meeting hall, the expedition team huddled in a tense circle, ignoring Smaug's furious curses echoing from the other side of the stonework. From somewhere above them came the dragon's voice, calling them cowards. Thorin's expression was thunderous as he fixed Li Wei with a glare. "That question should be for me, Li Wei," Thorin snapped. "How did you get in here? You shouldn't have been so reckless. Waking the dragon prematurely isn't what we agreed on." "You've nearly ruined the expedition," another voice said. "All the keys and maps my father left us will be for nothing." Li Wei shook his head and steadily told them what he'd seen and heard. "No, Thorin. That plan is obsolete. Your intelligence is out of date." He let it settle a moment before he spoke the words that silenced the hall. "Smaug has allied with the great enemy. Remember the necromancer Gandalf mentioned? He is Sauron, the Dark Lord of Middle-earth. He has already made contact with Smaug. The dragon was never fully sleeping. It lay in wait, pretending to be drowsy while cooperating with Sauron. It was counting on you to deliver yourselves to it." The anger draining from Thorin's face left behind stunned disbelief. When Thorin's look wavered, Li Wei continued, "Orcs and wargs from Moria and the Misty Mountains have joined forces and are marching this way by the tens of thousands. They mean to crown Smaug king under the mountain and seize everything. No, I am the true master here." Thorin burst out. He drew breath, furious and determined. "We need a new plan." He looked around, collecting himself. "If the dragon is awake, We must face it. I declare the original plan void. Before the Eastern Army arrives, we have to kill it, or everything will be lost, and I will call for aid from my kin at once." Thorin's voice sharpened as he laid out a new objective. "Balin, you do recall how to make blast bombs?" Balin rubbed his chin. "It's been a long while, but I could remember once I'm in the workshop." "Good. We'll go to the processing room and make explosives. We'll use them to draw Smaug to the furnace, then pour molten metal into the chamber and trap him with his own horde. Once he's encased, we kill him in one blow." The dwarves murmured in agreement. It was bold and old-fashioned, but it might work. Li Wei, however, shook his head. "It won't," he said. "Heat won't stop him. I tried magma. To Smaug, it's only a bit hotter than usual. He'll crawl right out. Then we just stand by and watch it become king under the mountain?" Thorin asked, voice rough with outrage. "Calm down," Balin interjected. "There may be another way." "Which way?" "There's a rumor about the fall of River Valley," Balin said. "They say the Lord of River Valley fired a black arrow and hit the dragon once. He couldn't kill it, but he took a scale from near its heart. If that missing scale is still exposed, then if we could strike that exact spot with another black arrow, we could kill it." He looked at Li Wei for confirmation. "The rumor is true," Li Wei said, his expression strange for a moment. "I saw it. Smaug does have a scale missing near the heart." "But the Lord of River Valley is long dead," a dwarf objected. "Where will we find an archer who can aim true at a dragon?" "There is one," Balin replied. "We know him." The old dwarf told them of an encounter with Bard, and the hall rippled with surprised whispers. "So there is still a black arrow, and it is in the hands of the descendant of the former Lord of River Valley." "Bard?" Thorin said, standing up. "Bard the bowman?" He turned toward Li Wei. "Can you watch the dragon here and hold it for a few days? We will return quickly." "I can wait," Li Wei replied. "That blasted dragon won't be going anywhere in the next few days." "And about the processing room, are there explosives there? Do you need directions?" "No need for a route," Thorin said curtly. "Just tell me the direction." It was simpler to dig straight where they needed to go than to creep through corridors. After Li Wei pointed out the best place and distance, Thorin nodded. There was nothing else to say. They must move. The dwarves hurried away at once. Bilbo hesitated for a moment, then moved to go with them. His help would be needed more than Li Wei's here. Sunrise and sunset passed. In Long Lake Town, in front of the prison, a guard named Alfred peered down through the iron bars and sneered at the imprisoned archer. "Look at our people's champion," he mocked. "What a sorry ruin you've become. The people once loved you, but you betrayed them. You consorted with thieves and helped steal the town's goods. Despicable." Bard's fingers tightened on the bars. Alfred continued, cruelly dangling the keys. "The people will turn on you. They'll curse you. You're finished." Bard's face was shadowed and hard. Words could always be twisted into charges, and he knew they'd been after him for a long time. "Perhaps," Alfred said with relish, jingling the keys. "But whatever the reason, you'll never leave this place." Then, with a thud, Alfred's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed to the ground, unconscious. The lock clicked open. Bard looked up in astonishment to see a small company of fully armed dwarves clustered before the cell. Balin stepped forward, his face the picture of solemn earnestness. "Bard, descendant of Girion, former Lord of River Valley," Balin said. "Now is the chance to prove your family's name. Will you seize it?" Before Bard could answer, a boy slipped between the dwarves and rushed forward. "Father!" "Bane!" Bard breathed, and then they were in each other's arms. Bard hugged his son tightly and searched his face. "How did you get here?" "They said they came to rescue you," the boy panted. "But they needed someone who knew the way." Balin offered a warm, approving smile. "Your son is admirable," he told Bard. "He has kept the household and acted decisively. He knew where you were imprisoned." Bard looked at the dwarves, then at his son, and a weary, complicated smile crossed his face. He closed his eyes briefly and sighed. "I had no choice," he said softly. He gathered himself, then looked up at Balin, and in that look was the beginning of understanding and resolve. The rescue had succeeded, for now, and a far fiercer fight waited beneath the mountain. Chapter 78, Reserves. The prison door clanged shut again, and Alfred, still dazed and lying on the ground, was shoved back into the cell. Before they left, the dwarves stuffed some trash against the barred window so passers-by couldn't see clearly inside. Perfect, one of them muttered. A small group slipped back to Bard's house and hauled out the black arrow. This thing's practically a spear, someone said. A normal bow couldn't launch it. We'll use the wind lance in the town square, Bard answered, looking toward the watchtower. The dwarves followed his gaze. That's a powerful weapon. Are we going to lure the dragon over? One of them asked. No, that would be too high a price for Long Lake Town. Can we borrow it from the mayor? Given how folk feel about the mayor, do you expect him to hand over the wind lance? Then take it, Thorin growled. If you ask me, just take it. There are too many guards at the square, Bard warned quickly. Wait until night. Patrols thin out and the gaps are long. We'll have time. Thorin shook his head. We can wait, but the dragon cannot. It's probably thinking of coming out now to wipe everyone out. All the sooner the better, and no number of guards can stop determined dwarves. Fine, let's go. Following Bard's route, the dwarves soon arrived at the watchtower base where the wind lance was mounted. Curious townsfolk watched, and when they caught sight of Bard, some looked surprised. Bard, weren't you captured? Shh, he said. I have important business. The residents exchanged looks, then began to cover for him. Guards are coming, one shouted, and another seemed to accidentally knock over his stall, blocking the path. Oh gods, how long will it take me to clean this up? He complained theatrically. I'll help, others cried, rushing forward. A crowd formed, ostensibly to help right the stall, but they dragged the delay out until the guards, impatient, stepped over to take charge. At that moment, the crowd dispersed and went about their business. The guards resumed their patrol, finding nothing suspicious. Inside the tower, 2 soldiers lay unconscious on stacked hay, covered with old cloaks. The dwarves had already climbed up. Bard stared at the wind lance. How do we carry something that big? You underestimate dwarves, Thorin said. It was built by our hands. We can take it apart the same way. Among the company, the warriors were few. Most were craftsmen. That proved useful. In short order, the massive crossbow, taller than a dwarf, was mostly dismantled into a pile of parts. The dwarves strapped the pieces to their frames and shoulders. Time to go, Bard murmured. Elsewhere, someone pounded on the prison door and shouted, Open up! Let me out! A passing guard heard the commotion and barked, Quiet! You won't get out without the mayor's order. You fools, the voice retorted. Don't you know the esteemed deputy of Long Lake Town is locked in here? Open the door and let me out. The guard dragged aside the trash at the iron window and peered in. There, a familiar face with a swollen eye stared back. The door was flung open. Quick, go catch Bard, that rebellious fellow. He's escaped, someone cried. Under Alfred's directions, Long Lake Town fell into an instant frenzy. Guards fanned out through every lane, but the search came up empty. Every route the soldiers took seemed to run into staged obstacles. A fallen potted plant from a flower stall, a fisherman's net tumbled across the road, other petty obstructions put in the path. The guards grew more frustrated with each delay. By nightfall, they still hadn't found Bard. Long before then, he and the dwarves had slipped beyond the town borders with the wind lance in pieces. Brother Bard, I don't think I realized how much influence you have, Balin said on the road as they walked. With your name, you could topple that corrupt mayor without lifting a finger. The people would set you up for it. Perhaps, Bard replied, shaking his head and lost in thought. The dragon-slaying weapon was now on its way to the Lonely Mountain, but Bard didn't plan to pin all his hopes on the Black Arrow. Even without a fated weapon, there were other ways to deal with a cunning dragon that dodged confrontation at the slightest provocation. Following Thorin's directions, Leeway slipped into the dwarves' processing room at the Lonely Mountain without Smaug noticing. His eyes widened when he saw the material reserves and the array of tools laid out before him. He felt like a mouse that had tumbled into an oil vat. On a workbench, he found the explosive pellets the dwarves had mentioned, mostly casings and semi-finished pieces. That was enough. Leeway quickly analyzed the design and unlocked a way to synthesize the flashbang pellet. It was a compact explosive. It dealt 8 points of damage with a small splash radius. It wasn't as powerful as TNT, but it detonated on impact when thrown, making it far more convenient than the cumbersome placement and ignite method TNT required. Each pellet needed only 1 unit of gunpowder to make. Crucially, it carried a blinding effect. Anyone caught with eyes open during the blast would be temporarily unable to see. In short, it was a Middle-earth equivalent of a flashbang, highly useful. Li Wei made several of the pellets and tucked them into his pack, then opened a nearby material chest. Sulfur, saltpeter, charcoal, and already mixed gunpowder, everything for making bombs, lay neatly stored. As a major dwarf processing site, the place kept not just gunpowder but plentiful raw materials, sand, paper, and more. Paper couldn't stop fire, but it could wrap gunpowder. With the mountain of supplies available, Li Wei set to work. In short order, he crafted a large stock of TNT, numerous flashbang pellets, and a handful of experimental fireworks for testing. Chapter 79. The Plan. Sometimes things seem useless simply because no one has discovered their proper purpose. Take fireworks, for instance. In Minecraft, they can deal damage, but normally they're shot into the sky and never hit anything. There is a way to change that trajectory: a crossbow. Loading a firework into a crossbow lets it fly straight until it hits something or reaches its maximum range. The explosive power depends on how much gunpowder or how many firework stars are packed into it, up to over 10 points of damage. That's comparable to an arrow from Li Wei's fully enchanted bow, but fireworks explode on impact and deal splash damage, which can be more useful against lightly armored targets. Fragile creatures without armor might be killed by one, but against a dragon whose scales are thicker than netherite, well. "Are you celebrating for me?" Smaug growled. "You talk too much," Li Wei muttered. He put away the flashbang pellet and the firework crossbow, drew his longsword, and slashed at Smaug's claw. The dragon gave a delighted, angry roar, and Li Wei slipped out through the 2-block-high opening. In his head, Li Wei ran a quick experiment log. Fireworks. Maximum damage similar to a fully enchanted bow. Like the flashbang pellet, it's an area attack. It consumes far more materials than a flashbang. Neither managed to pierce the dragon's armor, but judging by Smaug's expression and how angry he'd become, the firework had done something. It wasn't entirely useless. Best used against quarry with low armor like orcs or wargs. A flashbang's range depends on the thrower's arm strength. Fireworks fired from a crossbow travel 30 to 70 meters depending on the gunpowder. Not far, but still useful. If soldiers could be equipped with them and fired in unison, it would be an impressive sight. Down the long corridor, Smaug glared at the opening, waiting for the human to emerge. Behind his body, rock fragments were stacked, ready. After Li Wei had ambushed him several times and slipped away each time, the dragon had grown more cautious. Smaug planned to block the opening with large stones the next time the human appeared, cutting off his escape. What Smaug didn't know was that Li Wei had the exact same idea. While Smaug waited in the corridor, Li Wei was digging behind it, planning to block Smaug's retreat and let the dragon experience the terror of being trapped. In less than a day, without Smaug's knowledge, Li Wei had sealed multiple entrances to the lair. At the moment, Smaug still didn't realize he could never return to the gold hoard he cherished. Li Wei finished the last block up, returned to the meeting hall fully armed, and was about to drink a few potions before entering to deal with the now inescapable boss when a breathless group of dwarves burst in. Wait, don't go yet!" "No need, really. We made it back, Li Wei," they panted, collapsing a heap of gear and falling to the floor. Many of them, parched, immediately pulled out water skins and tipped their heads back. Bomber, in particular, sprawled beside the infinite water source and began drinking with such gusto he nearly fell in. "Drink slower," Li Wei warned, grabbing the well-proportioned dwarf and pulling him back from the pit. "I thought you wouldn't be back for days. I'd already started planning how to cook dragon meat." "We haven't stopped since we left," Balin said, completely exhausted. Dwarves aren't known for long-distance stamina. If they'd been traveling at full speed since they departed, it was a wonder none had dropped from exhaustion. Even Balin and Fat Bomber were spent, and Thorin, the hardiest of them, was too tired to speak or be his usual proud self. "You can't do everything," Li Wei remarked. "Look, we brought something that can counter that dragon." The dwarves stepped aside to reveal the man who'd been riding with them. He wore simple clothes, a longbow slung across his back, and he held a huge, black-fletched arrow, almost like a spear, in his hand. "You're the legendary warrior Li Wei?" the man said. "Do I know you?" Li Wei asked. "You may not have met me, but your name travels," the stranger said. "A few months ago, refugees came to Long Lake Town and chanted your deeds. They spoke of a black-armored warrior in the Anduin Valley, a man with a sword that seemed to burst into flame, an eerie sight that sent orcs fleeing. They said he and a wise wizard saved people on both sides of the river." "I am Bard of Long Lake," the archer said, bowing. Li Wei nodded. He felt respect for any man who would stand between danger and civilians. Bard returned the look with even greater seriousness. "I think you should know what we came for," Li Wei said, pointing to the hole in the distant wall. Bard peeked over, curiosity pulling him 2 steps closer. "No," Bard said after a moment. "I advise against getting too near. Smaug has a way with words. If you don't want your ears insulted, keep your distance." Smaug's taunts still echoed down the corridor. His voice was rich and venomous. He had been speaking for so long it seemed he felt little pain. "What do we do?" someone asked. "Assemble the wind lance and shoot him." "But we only get 1 shot," another voice warned. "That arrow must hit his heart." All eyes turned to Bard. "I will," he said simply. There was no bravado, only the calm of a practiced hunter. Li Wei trusted him. Bard was the kind of man who would rush at a flying dragon to draw its fire away from the town using nothing but ordinary arrows. "I have a plan," Thorin said after resting a moment. "Beyond the long corridor, there's a secret passage. It's only wide enough for the dragon to dive into. To get in, he'll have to expose his chest, and once he's inside, he can't turn around. We can set the wind lance at the end of that passage, lure him in, and then—" Thorin fixed his gaze on Bard. "It's up to our marksman. If this works," Thorin continued, voice steady, "I'll give you a king's promise. Ask anything, within reason, as long as it doesn't cross a dwarf's bottom line." Bard gave a curt nod. "I hope you aren't like your grandfather." Thorin's face darkened for a beat, but he said nothing. No one made more of it. Soon 13 dwarves, 2 humans, and 1 hobbit had gathered in a circle to work out details. Li Wei asked about the direction of the secret passage, then clapped his hands. "Oh, the direction to that passage is blocked by me," he said. "But that's fine. I'll take it apart later." At first, Thorin didn't understand. How could such a large passage be blocked? Then his eye caught the huge stone wall sealing the meeting hall's entrance. Of course, that would block it. Thorin relaxed. "That's good," he said, accepting the result without prying into Li Wei's methods. "But the key to this plan is a decoy," Thorin said. "We need someone agile, who can move quickly across rough ground and isn't too tall. A tall man might not fit through many dwarf passages, and if the dragon is on his tail, a stumble would be fatal. The one among us who best fits those requirements," Thorin began. Bilbo looked from left to right, took a deep breath, and squeezed forward. "Think again," Thorin interrupted, pressing a hand on Bilbo's shoulder and pushing him gently back. Chapter 80, End. "That dragon and I have a blood feud. You hold no appeal for the dragon, Bilbo. It won't be riled over a hobbit it's never seen. Li Wei won't work either. He can face the dragon head-on, but if he suddenly flees, it'll only make things suspicious." Thorin stood in the center of the group. "Only I'm the true heir to Durin's throne. I will return to be the king under the mountain. Only I will it desperately want to kill, and it will seize every opportunity. And only I can make it lose its mind." A flash of madness lit Thorin's eyes. Li Wei saw it all. Yes, Thorin was right, but the reverse was also true. This dragon would drive the rightful heir insane. From the moment he set foot in the lonely mountain, Thorin had been drifting toward madness. The curse on that land had wrapped itself tightly around him. If he truly reclaimed the throne, that root of greed might grow to rival or even surpass the dragon's. If so, let the madness come. Li Wei's sword arm and resolve were ready. "Li Wei, what do you think?" Thorin asked, as they'd always asked Gandalf. "Go for it," Li Wei replied. He led the dwarves along the passage he'd dug earlier, bypassing the long corridor, and they finished assembling the wind lance at the end of the secret way. Bard crouched at the mouth of the passage and looked at the exquisitely crafted, newly refurbished wind lance and at the black arrow in his hand. He took a few deep breaths and waited in silence. "You fire-breathing worm!" A loud curse answered from the other side. Smog's first reaction was to assume the hateful Steve had come again, but when it turned its head and saw Thorin, it paused and then gave a meaningful, malicious laugh. "Look who it is. Isn't this the last heir of the cowardly Durin's folk, Thorin Oakenshield? What? Tired of wandering around doing menial work for others? Have you finally come to seek death?" Smog abandoned its guard of the hole and stalked toward Thorin. Each step of its massive body made the floor tremble, but Thorin merely stared back, motionless as a statue. "You think finding some unknown warrior can chase away the great Smog? You coward among dwarves! You scum! What did you call me? You fat, slow, muddle-headed worm." Thorin finally had the right words at last. Having been insulted from every angle for so long, the dwarf had reached his limit and shouted back, "You false usurper, you fat worm who wriggles in deep pits. You will never know what is truly valuable. You have no status, no right to rule anything. Only I, the rightful king under the mountain, have the right to sit on this throne." "Ha ha! Did you just excrete that idea? How fresh." Smog drew nearer, preparing to toy with the dwarf before killing him. Bang! Thorin suddenly threw several flare bombs. They hit the dragon's eyes, exploding in a fierce white light and cloud of dust. The glare and shock didn't make the dragon blink. It only made its long neck instinctively pull back a little. "I've had enough of these tickling things. Why not try something different?" Smog's belly glowed red, and it spewed a torrent of flame. Thorin lunged for the corner and bolted toward the forge. As Smog rounded after him and prepared an amplified blast, Thorin shouted, "Pull!" The dwarves in ambush hauled down the sluice gate. A massive torrent slammed down from above, drenching Smog and dousing the fire gathering in its maw. "Very good. You're starting to annoy me." Rumble. Smog quickened its steps, craning its huge head forward and tracking Thorin. At the forge's end, Thorin tossed 2 more flare bombs that struck the dragon's head and snagged its attention. Clang! A heavy iron gate swung open and Thorin slipped inside to hide. At the same time, several giant stones fell where he had been standing, smashing onto Smog's skull. "You think that can hurt me? Too bad. I've seen this trick before." "How could it have? Seen everything?" Feely muttered to himself after dropping the stones from a high ledge. Their contrivances hadn't worked yet, and Smog grew tired of the game. It lunged toward the large door where Thorin had disappeared, folded its wings, and dove inside, its belly glowing crimson as it prepared to incinerate the dwarf. Then something else surprised it. Here it comes. A gust and a commotion exploded from the passage entrance, striking Bard in the face. A huge shadow loomed, claws scraping steel against stone along the walls. Smog swooped down. "Another human?" it suggested aloud. "You think your words will help?" It added in dragon speech, trying to sway this human who smelled slightly different. But Bard never looked up. His eyes were fixed on the dragon's belly and didn't waver for a heartbeat. Nothing outside that target could break his attention. When Smog came within range, Bard moved, but not first the wind lance on the ground. He reached for the longbow on his back. Whoosh! An ordinary arrow flew at Smog. At almost the same instant, Bard fired the wind lance, launching the spear-like black arrow. Thwack! The ordinary arrow struck the diamonds embedded between Smog's scales, dislodging them and revealing the skin beneath, a gap where scales did not protect. The black arrow followed a heartbeat later and drove straight into that opening, piercing into the dragon's heart before it could react. Ugh! Ah! Molten hot blood spurted from Smog's maw. It lost strength in a rush. Its mouth gaped as if it were trying to say something, but its expression showed only fury. Nanhung. Abnormal status, severe bleeding, life suppression. As expected of a weapon specialized against dragons, the effect was severe. Bard rolled, tumbling into a 2-meter-deep pit to avoid the downward impact of the falling beast. "Li Wei," he called. "I'm here." Li Wei dropped down from another shaft. He drank a level 2 strength potion, gripped his longsword, and leapt. The dragon was almost spent. Now it could only thrash its claws, scraping the walls with thunderous sounds. Even half dead, it was terrifying. A single random swipe could be fatal. But however it thrashed, it could not escape Li Wei's blade. Li Wei moved in front of the dragon and struck over and over, delivering the final blows to that 100-meter-long creature. Each hit increased the damage taken, This was the bonus from dynamic swordsmanship. Once a target was locked, each additional combo strike slightly increased the next hit, stacking up to 12 consecutive blows. Smaug couldn't flee or naturally regenerate. Every point of health Leeway cut was gone for good. When the combo reached its limit, Leeway thrust with everything he had, dealing a devastating strike of 30 damage. Ding! The blade found the narrow gap between jawbones and severed the last spark of life from the dragon's head. Its pupils dulled, limbs relaxed. From that moment on, the fire dragons of Middle-earth were declared extinct, or were they? Prompts appeared in succession. Locked, Dragon Slayer, unlocked. Liberator of the Lonely Mountain. Title acquired. Is it over? Thanks to Ice-Sealed Moo for the 10,000-point reward. Thanks to Book Mountain Fellow Taoist for the 5,000-point reward. Thanks to Deep Sea Submarine in the Sky for the 500-point reward. Thanks to Revenge Fire for the 100-point reward. Thanks to Reader 201915646169783527 for the 500-point reward. Thanks to Banana Big Wax for the 100-point reward. Thanks to Ming Julie for the 100-point reward. Thanks to Jim Liu 2000 for the 100-point reward. Thanks to Xin Yi Who Loves Sleeping for the 500-point reward. Thanks to all friends who voted. Thank you for your support. It's over. Time to go home and farm.